Chapter 781. Fifth Miss. Shuchi turned around in a panic and almost knocked over the chair beside the bed. What did you say to the supervisor eunuch just now? Xiao Wanru looked at Shuchi calmly and asked. After calming down, Shuchi lowered her head and said, ignoring the pain on her body, I didn't say anything. I just gave him a pouch as you asked and asked him to take good care of my master. She would live here for a period of time, so it was necessary to build a good relationship with the supervisor eunuch. After saying that, Shuchi took a few deep breaths nervously. Just now, when she entered the door, she had wanted to explain it in this way, but Fifth Miss didn't ask. It seemed that there was something pressing on her heart, which made her breathless. Now that she told the reason, she felt relieved. She had a legitimate reason, so the Fifth Miss couldn't find it even if she doubted it. Most of what she said just now was true, and she was on the Fifth Miss's side. Even if the Fifth Miss knew it, she couldn't say that she did anything wrong. Thinking of this, Shuchi calmed down. If it weren't for the heavy psychological pressure just now, she wouldn't have been so nervous. Shuchi repeatedly told herself that she had a legitimate reason. She gradually looked relaxed, turned sideways, bowed to Xiao Wanru and said, Fifth Miss, I'll go down and see if the medicine is ready for my master. The medicine was being brewed in a small room beside the side hall, and a little palace maid in the Imperial Palace was cooking it. Go ahead, Xiao Wanru said, but her eyes still fell on Shuchi. Under Xiao Wanru's gaze, Shuchi went to the small room beside her. When she walked out of the door, she felt that the pressure on her body was gone. She took 2 deep breaths and reached out to wipe the cold sweat on her forehead because of nervousness. Since she had passed the test, there was nothing to worry about next. She had guessed that the Fifth Miss would ask her about it. Shuchi followed Xiao Yenru, so she naturally knew that Xiao Wanru was smart. Otherwise, her master wouldn't have failed repeatedly. Miss. Seeing Shuchi go out, Yujia called out and hinted to Xiao Yenru, who was lying on the bed. Xiao Wanru stood up, looked at Xiao Yenru, who was still lying on the bed, and said calmly, Let's go out for a walk. Miss, you'd better stay here, Yujia advised. The first miss was seriously injured. If she went out for a walk, people might say something bad about her in the Fengyi Palace. It doesn't matter, Xiao Wanru said, stood up and walked out. She was really not worried about what Shuchi would say to the eunuch. She had never intended to show her sisterhood to Xiao Yenru. Xiao Yenru was ambitious. She didn't know what had happened in the last life, but her situation at that time was somewhat similar to the current situation. She didn't enter Prince Zhou's mansion or Prince Yu's mansion, but finally entered the Imperial Palace. It could be seen that something had happened in the last life that forced her to enter the Imperial Palace. In the last life, she seemed to be quite far away from Duke Xing's mansion. Although Duke Xing's mansion had spared no effort to kill her, she didn't know it and didn't pay much attention to Duke Xing's mansion. Therefore, she didn't know what had happened to Xiao Yenru. However, even if something had happened, it was impossible for her to inquire about it in her situation at that time. Just like what happened to Xiao Yenru this time, it was related to the 2 princes, so they should have given a gag order. It was generally impossible to inquire about it. In this way, Xiao Yenru's reputation was not ruined. However, after what happened, she would miss the chance to get close to Prince Zhou's mansion and Prince Yu's mansion. It was impossible for her to get a good marriage after leaving the Imperial Palace. Although the aristocratic families in the capital city might not be able to inquire about it, something must have happened since Xiao Yenru, who was the most popular princess among the princes, was sent out of the Imperial Palace. The aristocratic families wouldn't marry such a girl who was sent out of the Imperial Palace. Therefore, staying in the Imperial Palace was her only chance to be a commoner or her only chance to get in touch with power. Xiao Yenru would not give up this opportunity. It would not do her any good to be close to her. There were wounded patients in the side hall, so the stove was warmer. When she stood in the corridor, the air suddenly became cold. Standing in the corridor, Xiao Wanru looked outside. This was the most remote side hall of the Fengyi Palace. There were few people around, except for a few palace maids passing by. Everything was quiet and deserted. Miss, did Shuchi say something to that eunuch? Yujia, who finally had a chance to talk to Xiao Wanru, took 2 steps forward and asked in a low voice. She always felt that Shuchi was as restless as her master. Xiao Wenru nodded and said with a slight smile. She must be speaking ill of her, and she was speaking ill of her calmly, as if she was trying to defend herself. Miss, I'll go to ask her about it. Yu Jie said worriedly. No. Xiao Wenru shook her head. She didn't care about Xiao Yinru's words, but she had to let others know that she had a bad relationship with Xiao Yinru, so she had no choice but to stay. As for why they had a bad relationship, if someone inquired about it, they would inevitably find out about Duke Xing's mansion. She would leave this matter to the follow-up. After standing at the door of the side hall for a while, Xiao Wenru walked outside. She didn't go far, just outside the side hall, and only attracted the attention of a few palace maids passing by. Seeing the palace maids' vigilant and alert eyes, Xiao Wenru smiled. She suddenly knew what Xiao Yinru had asked Shuchi to say. Since Shuchi could arouse the palace maid's vigilance and alert, and then she thought of her identity as a candidate, the answer was self-evident. Xiao Yinru was afraid that she would have a relationship with Prince Zhou and that she, as a mediocre fifth miss, would get involved with Prince Zhou and make the Empress angry. Just now, she deliberately said nothing in front of the eunuch and let Xiao Yinru, who was seriously injured and almost couldn't hold on, deal with all the things. On the one hand, it was because Xiao Yinru would be worried if she didn't do this. On the other hand, it was to show the eunuch in charge that she was really useless and had no sisterhood. A useless miss from an aristocratic family, who couldn't help Prince Zhou with anything, was of no use to Prince Zhou and the Empress. If such a useless miss from an aristocratic family was allowed to get close to Prince Zhou and make something that made the Empress unhappy, all the palace maids in the Fengyi Palace would be angry, so it made sense that they stared at her with vigilance. Xiao Wenru smiled in a very good mood and looked up at a white plum blossom in front of her. It was a very light plum blossom, and it was a lonely one. It seemed that it was not planted carefully. The flower color was ordinary, and there were a few sporadic flowers. At first glance, it was obvious that it was not carefully maintained. This was originally a side hall, and the masters would not come to such a remote place. No one would come here to enjoy the flowers. It was a difficult thing for the flowers to grow on their own. She raised her hand and pinched a small branch from the tree. There was only a small flower on it. Looking at the small but tenacious plum blossom, the smile at the corners of her mouth became a little clearer. She narrowed her eyes and held the flower against the sun. Although it was small, it was still beautiful and moving. The elegant young girl was dressed in plain clothes. On her beautiful little face, her facial features were exquisite. Her white and tender skin was as lustrous as jade. What was even more outstanding was her pair of limpid eyes. Her jet-black eyelashes fluttered twice like butterfly wings. The color of her eyes was rippling and moving. Her cherry lips were not painted red, and when she smiled, it diluted the elegance of her plain appearance, making her look charming and moving. The flower in her hand was in front of her nose. The light flower became beautiful and fragrant because of her smile. Chu Luchen stood there, and his heart, which had always been cold, seemed to be hit heavily. It was sour and soft, and there was a trace of affection in his eyes involuntarily. He didn't know when it started, but he knew that he, who didn't care about anything before, gradually cared about it. The first thing was that he cherished his life. In fact, he didn't care about his body the most. No one cared about it, so why should he care about it? He would die sooner or later anyway. If he could live, he would live freely. If he couldn't live, it didn't matter. Who in this world really cared about him? But unconsciously, he seemed to be willing to live, and he felt that he should take good care of his illness. If he was sick all the time and was in a precarious condition, he might really die at any time. Then why should he keep her? As long as he thought of her being alone, his heart would be very uncomfortable, very painful. Even if it was for her, it seemed that he could not give up on himself anymore. In fact, he could do better, he could do more for her. From ignorance at the beginning to sobriety later, Chu Luchen was glad that he understood it early and could draw her into his arms step by step. With her, his heart wouldn't be completely cold and indifferent. Fortunately, it was really fortunate that he could clearly and quickly understand her feelings. Fortunately, Before he understood her feelings, he already knew how to lock her firmly by his side. Everything was just right, neither too early nor too late. Inexplicably, she felt that something in her heart was slowly put down. Finally, she could walk to his side instead of just watching from a distance. This feeling was very strange, as if the two of them had known each other for a long time and had been worried about each other, but had never had a chance to talk about it. It was as if the dust had settled after going through a long journey. But in fact, the two of them had only known each other for about 3 years, hadn't they? Why did he have a feeling of crossing thousands of mountains? Chu Luchen thought for a while and felt that he did not need to take this feeling to heart. He only needed to understand his feelings now. Since he did not allow himself to die early, he planned to protect her for the rest of his life. He wanted to protect her for a long time instead of making her sad and painful. His illness was basically no longer a big problem, and he just needed to recuperate in the future. Moreover, he had a foundation of martial arts. Although he didn't look very well, he was actually not worse than ordinary people. Zhuozhuo, what are you looking at? With a smile on his lips, the jade-like man, as elegant as the divine truth in heaven, interrupted Xiao Wenru's gaze. Chapter 782. Xiao Wenru turned around, put down the plum branch in her hand, and came over to bow. Your Highness, why are you here at this time? Uncle asked me to have a look. Chu Luchen said casually, is Xiao Yenru all right? The so-called asking him to have a look was actually just asking a eunuch to have a look. The emperor didn't think it was necessary for a prince to have a look at this time, but he was not surprised that Chu Luchen volunteered. The Empress Dowager had decided that Chu Luchen liked Xiao Wenru 3 years ago. Others didn't know it, but the emperor knew it very well. It's all right. Just now, he told the eunuch in charge to let me go out early and come back late every day. He takes good care of me, Xiao Wenru said with a soft smile. What is she up to again? Chu Luchen said lazily, do you want me to stop her? No, just let her do it. Xiao Wenru shook her head. She didn't want Chu Luchen to ruin Xiao Yenru's plan. She not only wanted Xiao Yenru to surface slowly, but also wanted Duke Xing's mansion. The relationship between her father and mother was full of doubts. She would find out the truth of that year. Let's go out for a walk? Chu Luchen suggested. Xiao Wenru shook her head and said, Your Highness, you'd better go back first. This is Fengyi Palace. Fengyi Palace was the Empress's territory. Chu Liuchen's every move here must be closely monitored. She didn't want to attract more people's attention before their relationship was officially announced. There might be some news from the Empress, but it should not be decided yet. Okay, if you need anything, just tell me. I'll ask someone to prepare a soft sedan and send you to Fengyi Palace every day. Chu Luchen said. He glanced at Xiao Wenru's soft and beautiful face and felt inexplicably peaceful. No, it's too special. Xiao Wenru thought it was better to keep a low profile. If someone asks, just ask me. Chu Luchen said unhappily. The gentleness between his eyebrows suddenly became cold, and there was coldness at the bottom of his eyes, which overlapped with the crown prince in Xiao Wenru's memory in the last life. But now she didn't feel frightened when she thought of it. Then keep it. I can leave if I want, okay? Xiao Wenru gave in. Alright. Chu Luchen answered reluctantly and added, if you have any difficulties, come to me. You know that place. Even if I'm not there, other people are there. You can send a message to me. Thank you, Your Highness. Xiao Wenru lowered her head and bit her lip, feeling inexplicably soft in her heart. After giving Xiao Wenru a few more instructions, Chu Luchen left with Xiao Xuanzi. As for the side hall where Xiao Yenru stayed, he didn't enter it and only let Xiao Xuanzi take a look inside. Master, there's someone over there. Turning around the side hall, Xiao Xuanzi pointed to a corner with sharp eyes. There was a figure peeking out just now. It was obvious that he was monitoring them. Let him come here. Chu Luchen said lazily. Come out. Xiao Xuanzi took a few steps forward, walked to the corner, and shouted. Chu Luchen stopped and saw a trembling figure coming out from the corner. It was a eunuch. Greetings, Your Highness. The eunuch knelt down, kowtowed, and said in a panic. Who sent him? Chu Luchen lowered his eyes and said coldly. I didn't. The eunuch stammered. His chest had been kicked hard, and the eunuch fell to the ground. Your Highness. Clutching his chest, the eunuch shivered and couldn't even finish his words. You are so ignorant. How dare you bump into me? If there's a next time, you'll be thrown into the lake to feed the turtles. Xiao Xuanzi said coldly. Chu Luchen turned around and strode away, and Xiao Xuanzi trotted to catch up with him. After the two of them disappeared, the eunuch, who clutched his chest and couldn't even finish his words in panic, stood up with his hands on his waist, rubbed his chest, and looked at Chu Liuchen's back with a complacent smile. Prince Chen seemed to be strong inside but weak inside. The kick seemed to be powerful, but in fact it was not very powerful, and he felt pain when he was kicked. If it were another prince, he would be kicked until he spat blood. He had to report it to the empress. Prince Chen was not to be feared. The eunuch heard such an important piece of information and went to report it to the empress happily. As for checking the whereabouts of Prince Chen, it was not his business. Moreover, although Prince Chen was not powerful, the guards around him were mostly masters, so no one dared to monitor him too closely. He only vaguely saw that the prince said a few words to the fifth Miss Xiao of Duke Xing's mansion and then left. It should be the emperor who asked Prince Chen to go there. Xiao Wanru stayed there for a while. Seeing that Xiao Yanru had not woken up yet, she found it was getting late, so she went back with Yu Jia. The soft sedan had been waiting outside the palace gate. When Xiao Wanru came out, she immediately came to serve her. When they arrived at Chuxiu Palace, the nanny in charge invited Xiao Wanru over and asked her about what had happened. These things happened outside Chuxiu Palace, so the nanny in charge didn't know. Xiao Wanru told her what she had seen. It was an accident, so she couldn't tell the details and looked very confused. As for the two misses who were going to be sent out of the palace, they had been sent out. Xiao Yanru was seriously injured, so she had to go to Fengyi Palace to take care of her every day these days. Since it was the empress's order, the nanny in charge certainly agreed without hesitation. Seeing that she couldn't get anything out of Xiao Wanru, she asked Xiao Wanru to go back to rest. On the way back, they met Han Dan, the palace maid, who was waiting at the corner outside their room. Seeing Xiao Wanru coming over, she was overjoyed and hurriedly stepped forward to salute. Greetings, fifth miss. Xiao Wanru stopped, looked at Han Dan, and asked, What are you doing here? I'm worried about the two misses. I heard that something happened to them, so I've been waiting here. Han Dan answered obediently. In fact, she was really anxious. She had taken a fancy to both misses. Although they focused on different things, they were both people she had set her eyes on. She didn't expect that something would happen to them at the same time. The palace maid who came back to deliver the message didn't tell her the whole story. She only said that the two of them stayed in Fengyi Palace together, so Han Dan hadn't been relieved until now. Big sister fell into the water and was injured. There will be no one to take care of her. Are you willing to take care of her? Seeing Han Dan, who was flattering her and making people feel good, Xiao Wanru suddenly asked with a thought. I'm willing to do whatever you want me to do, fifth miss. Han Dan was overjoyed, nodded repeatedly and said happily. If Chuxiu Palace finished the beauty selection, it would be quiet for 3 years. She couldn't afford to wait for so long. Her words were extremely clever. Not only did she express her intention, but she also flattered Xiao Wanru. You can go to Big Sister's place to serve her, but you have to understand what is most important to you? Xiao Wanru smiled slightly. Her smile was beautiful and charming, but it made people feel a little cold in the night. Fifth miss, don't worry. I will definitely listen to you. I know who is my real master. Han Dan said in a hurry. Seeing that it was fifth Miss Xiao who came back, but the first Miss Xiao stayed in Fengyi Palace, she knew that the fifth miss in front of her was not someone she could deal with at all. If she didn't obey, she would lose her life. She wanted to stand out in the palace and didn't want to lose her life. The first Miss Xiao and the fifth Miss Xiao had been fighting secretly, but the fifth Miss Xiao had always had the upper hand. It seemed that it was the same this time. In Han Dan's heart, Xiao Wanru was someone she couldn't refuse. Thinking of the Empress's Fengyi Palace, which was the Empress's place, she had no chance to go there in the past. Even if the first Miss Xiao had no hope, she might still be able to stay in the Empress's palace. Thinking of this, She became more and more excited and looked at Xiao Wanru with more desire. She had always been a practical palace maid, but there had never been a good opportunity. Now that the opportunity had come, how could she not seize it? Just wait. When the time comes, I will let you serve my big sister. After Xiao Wanru left, only such an understatement was left in the air. Han Dan was overjoyed. In the dark, she couldn't help looking at Xiao Wanru's back with her heart beating wildly. The opportunity she had been waiting for a long time had finally come. Han Dan was summoned to the side hall of the Funyi Palace 2 days later. The reason was that Xiao Yanru needed someone to take care of her. When she was in Chuxiu Palace, she had done a good job in taking care of Xiao Caihuan, who had an accident at that time. Now she was asked to take care of Xiao Yanru on the one hand, because she was good at taking care of others, and on the other hand, Xiao Yanru needed a familiar person to take care of Xiao Yanru with Shuqi. Of course, the reason why Xiao Yanru suddenly thought of Han Dan and insisted that Han Dan serve her was that Xiao Wanru repeatedly expressed that she wanted Yu Jie to stay by Xiao Yanru's side. Xiao Yanru repeatedly refused, so she thought of Han Dan in Chuxiu Palace. Compared with Yu Jie, she was more willing to find a palace maid who had secretly surrendered to her before. Sometimes, Shuqi was really too busy to handle everything alone. It was not difficult to transfer an ordinary palace maid here. At most, she could just return to the palace and there was no need to write down the name list. After the eunuch in charge of this remote side hall asked the chief eunuch in charge of the Funyi Palace for instructions, the matter was settled. It was a trivial matter and there was no need to report it to the empress. Therefore, Han Dan came to Xiao Yanru's side and served Xiao Yanru together with Shuqi. She was very obedient and wholeheartedly flattered Xiao Yanru. No matter what Xiao Yanru said, she would follow Xiao Yanru and help Shuqi with her work. In less than 2 days, Xiao Yanru was very satisfied with Han Dan and felt that she was a useful palace maid. In the past few days, Xiao Yanru had not been idle. When it was necessary to use Han Dan, Xiao Yanru asked her to go outside to inquire about information. Although the information she got was not very useful, it was still satisfactory. When would Prince of Zhou come? When would Prince of Zhou leave? When would the Emperor come? How long would the Emperor usually stay? Chapter 783. Destined to marry the Emperor? Chu Qingge, Prince Cheng, stood in front of the window with his hands clasped behind his back and said without looking back. He was dressed in a light layman's robe, just like an ordinary scholar living in the mountains. The room was very simple. It was just an ordinary meditation room, hidden behind the stone forest. It was a place for quiet cultivation. There was a table and 2 chairs in the room. On the square table, there was an open scripture, a string of sandalwood beads, and the 4 treasures of the study, which were also the simplest kind. Just by looking at this place, it was hard to believe that this was the place where the emperor's only younger brother lived. But this was indeed the place where Prince Qing lived now. At this moment, he was not the only one in the room. Standing behind him was a man with a chubby face raised. It was Xiao Jing of Duke Xing, but I don't dare to spread the news. I'm afraid that Ru'er will be in great trouble. Duke Xing frowned tightly and looked very pale. His most outstanding eldest daughter had such an accident in the palace. As a father, he was in a difficult position at the moment. He didn't know what to do at the moment, so he could only come to Prince Cheng for help. Is it true that she is destined to marry the emperor? Prince Cheng said lazily. His phoenix eyes, which were unique to the royal family, narrowed slightly and asked casually. He turned back to sit down at the table, picked up the teacup that had just been made, lifted the lid, flicked off the foam, took a sip, and put it down. Did the abbot tell you personally? I didn't say it myself. I heard someone talking to the abbot. I didn't know who it was, but Prime Minister Zhang was also in Huaguang Temple that day. I don't know if it was Prime Minister Zhang. Duke Xing said hesitantly. Prime Minister Zhang? Prince Cheng lowered his eyes slightly. After thinking for a moment, he said coldly, It can't be him. If he knew it, my brother must also know it. At this time, he might have already... Pausing, Prince Cheng leaned back and looked at Xiao Jing with a deep look in his eyes. This matter, could it be that my brother has already known it? He had already known what had happened in the Imperial Palace. He had thought that Xiao Yanru was basically fine even if she was ruined. But now he felt that if it was true, then the news he got was just a facade. She was destined to marry the emperor. The next emperor was still competing for the throne, but the current emperor was still alive. If Xiao Yanru was really set up this time, was it her brother, the emperor, who was the emperor, who had done it? It was still not clear who Minister Zhang favored. At least, when he sent people to contact him in private, this Minister Zhang was extremely fair. He only said to be loyal to the person on the throne. In other words, whoever sat on the throne, he would be loyal to that person. There was no need to choose a side. Prime Minister Zhang and Prime Minister Wen were the left and right prime ministers of the imperial court. Usually, they didn't get along very well, but they were very similar in that they didn't choose a side and were both cunning foxes. They seemed to be loyal to the current emperor, but it was not easy to see whether they were like this in private or had already chosen a prince's side. However, based on the current situation, if Prime Minister Zhang really knew that the eldest miss of the Xiao residence was fated to be the emperor, he would definitely not allow this eldest miss to marry properly. Even if she were to marry, she could only marry the emperor to make up for her fated fate. Xiao Yanru had disputes with Prince Yu and Prince Zhou. The two princes had a fight in the abandoned garden and then the empress heard about it. Prince Qing had his own way to inquire about it. Although he was not very clear, he was basically sure that both Lin Luiyue and Chu Liuzhou seemed to want to marry the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion. If it was really the case, and the emperor knew about the destined to marry the emperor, it was inevitable that the first Miss Xiao could not marry either of them, and her destined to marry the emperor would fall into the imperial palace. You said that your first miss was framed? Prince Cheng touched the teacup in his hand with interest and said slowly, "My eldest daughter has always been steady and decent. For so many years, she has been abiding by the rules for girls and is not so enthusiastic about entering the imperial palace to attend the consort selection. 3 years ago, when the imperial palace selected consorts for several princes, Ru originally wanted to avoid it and just wanted to marry a simple family. Since Ru is willing to live a plain life, I am also willing to do so. Unexpectedly, such a thing happened as soon as I entered the imperial palace. What should I do?" Xiao Jing's eyes turned red. He had a kind face, but at this time he looked more like a loving father. 3 years ago, Prince Cheng also knew that Xiao Yanru avoided the consort selection. Chu Luiyue and Chu Liuzhou did not expect that Duke Xing, whom they wanted to win over, had actually been working for Prince Cheng and secretly worked for Prince Cheng. Prince Cheng knew this. When he asked Xiao Jing about it, Xiao Jing said that his daughter did not want to enter the imperial palace, so she did not want to attend the consort selection. For this reason, he secretly thought that Xiao Jing's daughter was good. "Your Highness, please save my daughter. She is still in the imperial palace now. What should we do?" Xiao Jing said with slightly red eyes. "If someone really checked your daughter's fate and she is indeed destined to marry the emperor, and my brother knows it, your daughter can't marry any prince, nor can she have any relationship with any prince. In the end, she will fall into my brother's hands." Prince Ching said. Was this all part of his good brother's plan? Then what should I do? Xiao Jing panicked. "Isn't it good? His Majesty may have other arrangements for your daughter. At that time, she can't escape the identity of the emperor's father-in-law. She is destined to marry the emperor, and maybe even the current empress has to make way for her." Prince Cheng twitched the corner of his mouth and asked with a smile. Xiao Jing knelt down with a plop, bowed his head to show his loyalty, and said, "Your Highness, if my daughter must have a relationship with the royal family, I hope it will be you. No matter what title you give my daughter, I will not care about it." "You want to give your daughter, who is destined to marry the emperor, to me?" Prince Cheng smiled and looked down at Xiao Jing with an unclear meaning in his eyes. "Yes, in my heart, I only recognize you," Xiao Jing said respectfully. His words pleased Prince Cheng, who reached out to help Xiao Jing up and said, "Duke Xing, get up. I understand what you mean." Of course, the person who was destined to marry the emperor was the real dragon, the son of heaven. Of course, Xiao Jing meant that he treated Prince Cheng wholeheartedly and firmly supported him to become the next emperor. "Send a letter to your daughter. Let her recuperate peacefully in the palace. There is an advantage to living in the Empress side hall. At least, Imperial brother can't come and visit as he wishes. As long as your daughter is well-behaved and sensible, Ben Wang will have a way to get her out of the palace safely. Prince Cheng was satisfied and in a good mood, so he said. He was not young and really needed a princess. He was afraid that he couldn't refuse the consort selection this time. In this case, it was not difficult for him to let Xiao Yinru marry into his mansion. Even though Xiao Yinru was said to be born as the Empress, he didn't believe that his imperial brother dared to say it out loud. The Empress was in the middle palace, but she had not lost her virtue. Moreover, she had given birth to the legitimate son, Prince Zhou. In any case, it was impossible for her to be deposed. The destined to marry the emperor was not only to marry the emperor, but also to be the empress. However, given the current situation, your daughter may not be able to be my princess, Prince Cheng said with a little regret. He really didn't care about Xiao Yinru's reputation. It made him more confident to marry a person destined to marry the emperor. Moreover, he heard that the first Miss Xiao was also smart and beautiful. It was not impossible to marry her. However, it was also difficult to marry her as the princess after such a thing happened. Your Highness, I'll do as you say. Xiao Jing secretly wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. He was finally relieved of the burden in his heart. The news that Xiao Yinru had an accident in the palace made the two princes fight with each other was like a bolt from the blue. Xiao Jing felt dizzy and almost couldn't believe it was true. His daughter had always been a scheming person. It was impossible for her to do such a thing. After thinking for a few days in the mansion, he immediately thought of Prince Cheng. Now only Prince Cheng could save his daughter. Originally, he had taken Prince Cheng's side, but he allowed his daughter to seduce Prince Yu and Prince Zhou in order to maximize the interests of Duke Xing's mansion. At present, it seemed that only Prince Cheng could be relied on. That was why he came here in a hurry to meet Prince Cheng secretly. Write a letter to your daughter later and tell her to behave herself in the palace and recuperate in the side hall. Don't see anyone. After a period of time, I will find a way to let her come out. Tell her not to panic and not to make decisions on her own. Prince Cheng waved his hand and gave an order. He liked obedient women. Yes, I will write a letter now. Xiao Jing said in a hurry. The news in the palace could not be transmitted out or into the palace. How could he, who had been desperate, not be happy when he finally heard the truth from Prince Cheng? After being led to a simple room on the side by the guard, Xiao Jing went to the desk, picked up the writing brush, and immediately began to write. He was really anxious. After asking about some specific matters, he told Xiao Yinru not to act rashly and that she must recuperate in peace and not have any other ideas. This letter was to be sent to the palace secretly in case it was discovered. Xiao Jing could not tell the truth, so he could only hint to Xiao Yinru to wait for his news. He would definitely save her and marry a good man in the future. Xiao Jing could not write more than 2 pages of the letter. He put down the writing brush in his hand, read it again, dried it, folded it, and put it in the envelope. He handed the letter to the guard who was standing aside. After taking it, the guard said to Xiao Jing, "Duke, you can go down the mountain first. Our master said that this place is simple and inconvenient to receive you. If we have a chance to meet next time, let's talk." These words were just polite words, indicating that Xiao Jing just met Prince Cheng by chance. Yes, I know. I will keep it in mind." Xiao Jing nodded repeatedly. After bowing respectfully in the direction of Prince Cheng's room, he left the place where Prince Cheng cultivated in a hurry with his trusted followers. With Prince Cheng's help, everything could be at ease. It was just that his so-called peace of mind was actually just a pool of chaotic spring water. Chapter 784. Xiao Jing couldn't send the letter to Xiao Yinru, but Prince Cheng could. Xiao Jing thought that Xiao Yinru, who had always been smart, should know what he meant at the sight of the letter and would not act recklessly. He was afraid that his daughter would lose her composure for a while, which would be courting death if she lost her composure in the Imperial palace. What he wanted was to reassure Xiao Yinru. Of course, he also wanted to send his daughter to Prince Cheng. Although Prince Cheng was not a good match, it also showed that if Prince Cheng ascended to the throne, his daughter should be able to sit on the throne, which was enough for Xiao Jing. As for the matter of having children, he could talk about it later. As long as he ascended to the throne, there would be plenty of opportunities to talk about other things in the future. Although there were two less choices, Prince Yu and Prince Zhou's impulsive actions were much worse than Prince Cheng's steadiness. How could the two of them succeed if they were so impetuous? Prince Cheng stood by the window and watched Xiao Jing leave in a hurry. He looked calm but a little cold. "What do you think?" He looked out the window and asked, but he was talking to someone behind him. "Born to be a princess? Can it really be tested?" Another voice came from behind him. It was a monk, Jian Master, the abbot of Yuyun Temple. Although Yuyun Temple was not comparable to a royal temple like Huaguang Temple, it was also quite famous in the capital city. There were many temples, and some people even came to Yuyun Temple for quiet cultivation. Prince Cheng chose to cultivate Buddhism here, which was more convincing than in Huaguang Temple. No one knew that Jian Master, the presiding abbot of Yuyun Temple, had been working for Prince Cheng for a long time. Or it could be said that Jian Master was Prince Cheng's trusted follower. He had entered Yuyun Temple early and gradually became the presiding abbot of Yuyun Temple. Prince Cheng had been planning for more than 10 years. "I don't know if it's true, but I'd rather believe it than not," Prince Cheng said with a sneer. "Your Highness, it's good that you think so. If you have to marry a princess, you should marry a trustworthy one. Besides, it's always better to marry a smart one than an untrustworthy one," Jian Master said after a moment of silence. Prince Cheng had never allowed others to mention this. It was rare for him to have such an opportunity, so he should advise him carefully. How credible is Xiao Jing's words? Prince Cheng paid attention to another aspect and did not take his words seriously. "Half and half," Master Jian said. Xiao Jing was too sly and sophisticated. It was hard to believe that he was a man of few words. He should have known about the so-called fate of the phoenix before, but he didn't reveal anything in front of your Highness. If it wasn't for the fact that something really happened to his daughter in the palace, he wouldn't have brought it up in front of your Highness. From this, it can be inferred that your Highness is not his only choice. Master Jie Yan's implicit words hit the nail on the head. Prince Cheng nodded, smiled coldly and said to himself, "Phoenix life? Does such a thing really exist?" "Your Highness, even if you say that there isn't, it's actually possible that there is." Master Jian put his palms together and whispered. Since he was the abbot of Yuyun Temple, he naturally believed in the mysteries of Buddhism. But is the first Miss Xiao really destined to be a phoenix? This penniless monk has no idea how it was tested. "It's fine if I can't guess it. She's just a woman. When you send the letter, add a sentence so as not to get the wrong meaning." Prince Cheng waved his hand and stopped thinking about Xiao Yenru. She was just a woman, and he hated women the most. Is this the letter sent by Duke Xing? Chu Luchen put the letter on the desk and asked in a low voice with his beautiful eyes slightly raised. "It's written by Duke Xing to the first Miss Xiao, and he is going to send it to the Fengyi Palace," Xiao Xuanzi reported. The letter was robbed on the way, and the little eunuch who sent the letter was still unconscious in the corner. In fact, there was no important secret in the letter. He just told Xiao Yenru to be careful and not to act rashly. Some hints told her not to act rashly and comforted her that he would take her out of the palace and that her marriage would not be delayed. It sounded like what a father who was worried about his daughter would say to his daughter. The problem was not in the letter, but in the letter. Xiao Jing doesn't have such a long arm to reach into the Empress's Fengyi Palace, Chu Luchen said lazily. He leaned against a couch in a large cyan robe, which made him look inferior to the ancient sages and sages. If people saw him at first glance, they would definitely think that he was a sage coming out of a painting. He had the unique style of the ancient sages and sages, which was elegant, thin, and handsome. Only when his eyes rolled slightly, there was a strange gleam at the bottom of his eyes, which made him look a little more cold. He was no longer a gentle and elegant child. "Master, who do you think it is?" Xiao Xuanzi asked cautiously. "Prince Cheng." Chu Luchen raised the corners of his mouth. In fact, Prince Cheng, who had been hiding in the dark, was the biggest opponent. Compared with Chu Luiyue and Chu Liuzhou, Prince Cheng was more composed, but now he intervened in Xiao Yanru's affairs. This was an accident. Given Prince Cheng's character, how could he intervene in Xiao Yanru's affairs? He knew a secret of Prince Cheng. He had never doubted whether there was anything between him and Xiao Yanru. In this case, he and Xiao Yanru were two people who had nothing to do with each other. It was really suspicious that they met each other. Master, I think Duke Xing is involved. Xiao Xuanzi thought for a while and said. Chu Luqian narrowed his eyes, and a trace of treacherous coldness flashed in his eyes. He raised the corners of his mouth to show a cold smile. Duke Xing was indeed Prince Cheng's man. In the past, he just suspected it, but now he was basically sure. The only thing he was not sure about was that Prince Cheng should not intervene at this time. Even if this person was Xiao Jing's daughter, so what? Prince Cheng would never be distracted by a woman. Then why did he do this? Prince Cheng had someone in the palace and he hid it quite well. It was not worth it for him to ask him to rescue people from the Empress's palace. So what was the reason for him to do this? How many benefits could he get from this? How much benefit could he get from it? Master, is it possible that Prince Cheng also likes the first Miss Xiao? Xiao Xuanzi asked hesitantly. From this, it was easy to come to this conclusion. If Prince Cheng did not like the first Miss Xiao, how could he intervene in the Empress's palace? If he was not careful, he could easily get into trouble. In fact, Xiao Xuanzi also knew that it was unlikely, but he was also convinced by the existence of the first Miss Xiao. She could seduce two princes and make Prince Yu and Prince Zhou fight for her. How could the first Miss Xiao be simple? At this time, it seemed that it was not so impossible for her to seduce Prince Cheng, who did not like women. No. Chu Luqian shook his head and denied it. There was a touch of sarcasm at the corner of his pale lips. Everyone only said that Prince Cheng was devoted to pursuing Buddhism. He didn't even have a wife or concubine in his mansion. The palace maids sent out from the palace were also ignored. He should really be devoted to pursuing Buddhism and live a peaceful life. However, he didn't know that his uncle did not like women, nor did he like beautiful women, but he liked young men. There were no wives or concubines in the mansion, which was more convenient for him to do this in private. Xiao Yanru's identity as a woman could not attract Prince Cheng's attention. Then what else could make Prince Cheng care about her? Suddenly, he thought of what Xiao Wanru had said to him before, and a sharp cold light flashed across his eyes. Was it because of the so-called inborn fate of the Empress? The inborn fate of the Empress was really a good thing. It actually made Prince Cheng, who did not like women, fall in love with women, and he was even willing to reach out to the Fengyi Palace regardless of the danger. Find a way to send the letter to the Empress. Chu Luqian said meaningfully. But the letter has been opened. Xiao Xuanzi looked at the letter with a big opening. If the letter was sent back with an opening, it would be discovered. So what? There are so many people in the palace with ulterior motives. As an invalid, I can't do anything even if I want to. Chu Luqian waved his hand lazily and said, he didn't want the Empress to not be suspicious. The more suspicious, the better. There would always be someone to fill the hole. Yes, I will put the letter back to the little eunuch. Xiao Xuanzi didn't understand at first, but when he saw the smile on his master's face, he immediately understood. He picked up the letter and was about to leave. Suddenly, he stopped and looked at Chu Luqian hesitantly. Master, if the first Miss Xiao really has the fate of the Empress, what should we do? If she really had the fate of the Empress, it would mean that the one who married her was the real emperor. Xiao Xuanzi's words were very straightforward. If they knew that Xiao Yanru had the fate of the Empress, they would definitely try their best to marry her, so that they could become the real emperor and enjoy the world. Since she really has the fate of the Empress, so what? Do you think that I should join hands with her to enjoy the world and enjoy the glory of this life? Chu Luqian said with a faint smile. Seeing his smiling face, Xiao Xuanzi's heart trembled. He was really talkative. He knew that his master didn't care about these things, but he still wanted to die. Wasn't he asking for trouble? If that's the case, this king might as well die of illness early. Xiao Xuanzi, do you have anything to do recently? Sure enough, the next moment he heard Chu Liuchen's elegant voice asking with a smile. No, I have something to do. I really have something to do. I'm very busy. Master, I'll go first. Xiao Xuanzi turned around hurriedly and was about to slip away. Do it first. After that, you will receive 10 strikes, so that you don't have to be idle all day and say some nonsense. A lazy voice came from behind, and there was coldness under his long eyelashes. My woman doesn't need the fate of the Empress. If she follows me, she will have the fate of the Empress. It didn't matter whether she had the fate of the Empress or not, and he didn't need to use her fate of the Empress to support his identity. As long as she was by his side, he would definitely take her to the sky. He didn't need to care about the so-called fate of the Empress. Chapter 785. This was a letter that had gone through many missions and plots. In the end, after several twists and turns, the letter finally fell into Xiao Yanru's hands. The letter was secretly given to Han Dan by a little palace maid. Han Dan took it and stuffed it into her sleeve. Then she took out the letter and presented it to Xiao Yanru when no one was around. Xiao Yanru hurriedly took it. Seeing that the seal of the envelope was open, she frowned and asked, "Why is the seal of the letter open? How could a letter sent to the Imperial Palace be opened?" Her father had always been a cautious person. How could he do such a careless thing? I don't know. Maybe he brought it here in a hurry. He said that it's a letter from Duke to First Mississippi. It's inconvenient for Duke to come here since the Empress is here. Han Dan said calmly and lowered her head respectfully. The light in the side hall was not bright and was a little dim, so her anxious face could not be seen clearly. Miss, why is Duke in such a hurry? Shuqi asked in confusion. She was also from the High Duke's public house, so she always thought that the High Duke was a person with a sense of propriety. Is this letter fake? Xiao Yanru looked at the words on the envelope and pulled out the letter paper inside to have a look. It was indeed her father's handwriting, and so were the small details. Xiao Jing had told her about this habit of paying attention to small details in the past. He also said that at a critical moment, he could help her distinguish whether the person who wrote the letter was her or not. At present, no matter from which angle she looked at it, it was indeed her father's handwriting. She read it doubtfully and frowned. She didn't know what her father meant. Did he want her to leave the Imperial Palace? If she left the Imperial Palace, she would be doomed. No matter which family she married, it would be impossible for her to have anything to do with the royal family. Moreover, in the current situation, she could only marry a lowly person. If she married a lowly person out of the capital city, her life would be over. How could she be reconciled to that? Is there any other message? Looking through the letter, Xiao Yanru still couldn't figure it out, so she asked. With her father's cautiousness, it was very likely that he would send another message. First, miss, there's no other message. The palace maid left after delivering the letter to me. She just asked me to deliver the letter to you quickly and said that you would understand after reading it. Han Dan shook her head and said after thinking for a while. That little palace maid also looked very nervous. After pulling him aside to deliver the message, she hurriedly left. Han Dan didn't know where this palace maid came from. She lived in the side hall with Xiao Yanru and saw few people. She didn't know whether this palace maid worked in the Empress's palace or worked for another master. Looking at the letter in her hand, Xiao Yanru's face darkened. If there was nothing else, it meant that her father asked her to stay in the Fengyi Palace to recuperate and go back when the time was right. She should not act rashly. But why did father send such a letter? He knew that such a big thing had happened and he was almost ruined. If he didn't come up with an idea at this time, he would really not have a chance in the end. Her father couldn't have meant that, but if that wasn't the case, then the letter was really written by her father. Xiao Yanru couldn't figure it out after thinking it over. After reading it for a long time under the lamp, she suddenly put down the letter in her hand and exhaled heavily. She knew her father well. If there was no hope, he would never watch her get married and leave the capital city. So it was the opposite of what her father meant. The letter was unsealed, which meant that it should have been read by someone else. Xiao Yanru didn't know who might have read it. In order to prevent others from reading the letter, her father said so. But in fact, it was the opposite of what her father meant. Her father wanted her to make a plan in the palace and settle the matter before leaving the palace. Otherwise, she would really have no hope. After thinking it through, Xiao Yanru looked relaxed and felt that she understood her father's secret message. However, she didn't expect that the meaning of the letter was indeed Xiao Jing's idea. He did want her to leave the palace in peace and not make any more trouble. After leaving the palace, Prince Cheng would take over. When Prince Cheng ascended to the throne, Xiao Yanru's phoenix life would still come true. In Xiao Jing's idea, of course, Prince Cheng wouldn't let the letter fall into the hands of others. As for the message, Xiao Jing originally wanted someone to pass it on, but he knew Prince Cheng's mind well. If he said more, it would mean that he didn't trust him, and Prince Cheng would be unhappy. If he didn't say anything, Prince Cheng would add a very obvious message in order to deal with it carefully. The message was passed on by word of mouth. As long as the person who passed it on was reliable, he was not afraid of being discovered. However, Xiao Jing and Prince Cheng didn't expect that Chu Luchen had been keeping an eye on Prince Cheng's people. The letter fell into Chu Liuchen's hands as soon as it was sent to the palace, and then it was sent to the Empress. After it was passed on several times, some of the Empress's people and some of Prince Cheng's people were among them. The original word of mouth had long been cut off. The message that Prince Cheng passed to the palace was actually very simple, that was, His Highness will make the decision. The sentence, His Highness will make the decision, didn't mention who this His Highness was, but one thing was certain. This, His Highness, must be a prince. If Xiao Yanru got this message, she must know that a His Highness was still secretly saving her. With someone protecting her, of course, she would not act rashly. Xiao Yanru's current requirements were getting lower and lower. As long as it was a His Highness, she didn't care who this His Highness was. Even if it was Chu Luchen, she also thought it was good. Even if she was a widow, it was better than marrying out of the capital city. In the past few days, she had been hesitating between Chu Luchen and Chu Liuxin. Which one was more suitable? Now she thought she had figured out Xiao Jing's deep meaning, and felt that he was urging her to take action. She leaned against the bed and frowned. She really didn't have much time left. The injury looked serious, but in fact, it was not serious. The wound had already been sealed. If she hadn't secretly asked the two maids to pour half of the medicinal liquid into her mouth in the past few days, she should have been able to leave the palace now. Who comes more often, Prince Qin or Prince Exen? Under the lamp, Xiao Yanru's face was a little pale. She asked Handan. Compared with Shuqi, Handan was more useful in the palace. Prince Exin comes more often, and Prince Exan also comes to see you, but Prince Qin doesn't come once. Handan thought for a while and concluded. He came once, but he asked the little eunuch of Prince Qin to come in and see you. Miss, you were still asleep at that time. Shuqi added. Xiao Yanru bit her lip and inexplicably felt that it was a pity. In fact, she preferred Chu Luchen. Except for Chu Liuchen's physical condition, Xiao Yanru was satisfied with all other aspects. Although he was the son of the former emperor, he could win the favor of the Empress Dowager and the emperor. Commandery Prince Qing, who was also the son of the former emperor, was not favored by the emperor at all, and the Empress Dowager also ignored him. From this point of view, Chu Liuchen's benefits were obvious. Moreover, Chu Luchen was handsome. Since she was a child, Xiao Yanru had secretly compared others with Prince Qin and found that no one around could compare with Prince Qin. He was handsome and unparalleled in the world. It was really a blessing for her to marry such a person. But he was not interested in her. Xiao Yanru saw this very clearly. At that time, she had thought about Chu Luchen, but she was pushed away in disgust when she threw herself into his arms. Every time she thought of this, she felt ashamed. In the past, when she saw other misses from aristocratic families throwing themselves into Chu Luiyue and Chu Liuzhou's arms, she felt it was ridiculous. She didn't expect that one day, she would be like them. But he didn't have any feelings for her. As for Chu Liuxin, he always felt that he was too childish. As a prince, he looked lively and childish. How could he ascend to the throne one day? At the moment, she had no other choice. Do you think Prince Xin will come tomorrow? Xiao Yanru asked. Let's do it tomorrow. She couldn't wait anymore. She had thought that her father would try to help her, but now it seemed that it was impossible. Prince Xian may come. He has been here a lot these days. Xiao Han said with a faint smile. Prince Xian also has feelings for the first Mississippi, knowing that the first Miss is injured. He will come over to tell you something nice and interesting and comfort you. If the first Miss responds to him, he will be very happy. In the past few days, when Prince Xian came to the Fengyi Palace, he would definitely come to this side hall to see the first Miss Xiao. At this time, the fifth Miss would sit quietly at the table and drink tea, and Prince Xian would chat and laugh with the first Miss Xiao. At first glance, it could be seen that Prince Xian liked the first Miss Xiao. Otherwise, why didn't he talk to the fifth Miss Xiao? Xiao Han understood it in this way, but she didn't know that Chu Liuxin ignored Xiao Wanru because Xiao Wanru's answers were always so cold that sometimes they couldn't talk anymore. If it weren't for Xiao Yanru, Chu Liuxin really couldn't sit still. Even a topic was frozen, so how could he talk about it? However, Xiao Yanru was eager to please him and talked enthusiastically. Miss, Prince Xian may not mean that. Shuqi had known that Chu Liuxin loved Xiao Wanru. Seeing that Han Dan didn't understand the fact, she reminded her master softly, for fear that Han Dan would misunderstand her master's feelings and get out of hand in the end. I know, but so what? Marriage has always been decided by parents. What's more, what if it's his fault? Xiao Yanru raised the corner of her mouth. Of course, she didn't expect Chu Liuxin to marry her willingly. However, Chu Liuxin was just a child who hadn't grown up. If she married into Prince Xian's mansion and coaxed him well, she could win his heart back. After making up her mind, Xiao Yanru told Shuqi, "Tomorrow, invite the fifth Miss to come here early and tell her what I mean. Ask her to find some painkillers for me. Although my wound has healed a lot, it still hurts when I sleep at night. If I can find some painkillers, I can sleep more peacefully at night." Go early in the morning? Han Dan asked in confusion. Yes, go early in the morning. Tell her that I didn't sleep well and woke up early. It's easier to be believed if I go early in the morning. Xiao Yanru said with a sneer, "My good sister is very shrewd. If I don't go early, she may explain it to me with other meanings." Xiao Wanru really couldn't do without the medicine tomorrow. Seeing Xiao Yanru's gloomy smile, Han Dan shivered, hurriedly lowered her head, and suppressed the panic in her heart. Chapter 786. Han Dan arrived at Chuxiu Palace early the next morning. Xiao Wanru didn't get up until now. She got up early these days. Although she didn't want others to think that she had a good relationship with Xiao Yanru, she still had to show her due respect. She couldn't let others say that she was cold-hearted to Xiao Yanru and that it was all her fault. After breakfast, Yu Jie came in with Han Dan. "What's the matter with my big sister?" Xiao Wanru asked. Han Dan came at this time, which meant that she didn't come for nothing. Xiao Yanru had recently regarded Han Dan as her confidant, who was more reliable than Shuqi. "Fifth Miss, the first Miss asked you to go to the Imperial Institute of Medicine to get some painkillers for her early in the morning. The first Miss said that she couldn't sleep well at night and was in pain." Han Dan lowered her head and said, "That's all?" Xiao Wanru asked calmly. There are some more." Han Dan shivered and said in a hurry, "The first Miss said that on purpose? It seems that she wants to plot against Prince Xian. She didn't dare to lie to the fifth Miss Xiao. Moreover, she had her own selfish motives. The fifth Miss Xiao not only deterred her but also grasped her selfishness." "Prince Xian?" Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows. She didn't expect that Xiao Yanru now liked Chu Liuxin. Compared with the others, Chu Liuxin was a little too childish. She was surprised that Xiao Yanru liked Chu Liuxin instead of the emperor who was in the Imperial Palace now. However, after thinking about it carefully, she didn't feel surprised. The emperor was young, had the empress in the Imperial Palace, other favored concubines, and had given birth to many princes. If Xiao Yanru really liked the emperor, she didn't know whether she would have a chance to marry him when the day came. Compared with the emperor, Chu Liuxin at least had a few advantages that the emperor didn't have. He was young and had no legal wife. There were infinite possibilities when he was young. "Yes, Prince Xian," he said that Prince Xian would come later. Han Dan answered carefully and stole a glance at Xiao Wanru. Prince Exine seemed to have a good temper and had a good relationship with the Xiao sisters. Every time he came to visit Xiao Yenru, although Xiao Wanru didn't like to talk, she would always talk to him. It seemed that she didn't want to ignore the fifth Miss Xiao. Go back and tell my big sister that I will go to the Imperial Institute of Medicine. Xiao Wanru thought for a while and ordered. Yes, then this servant will go back first. Han Dan answered. Xiao Wanru waved her hand and left respectfully. She didn't turn around until she reached the door. In the room, Xiao Wanru stood up. Miss, are you really going to get some painkillers? I think first Miss is very good. When Prince Exine comes over, she always smiles happily. It doesn't seem that she is in pain, Yu Jie said. Since I have said that I will go, I have to go. Otherwise, it will be hard for others to criticize me. Xiao Wanru walked out with a smile. Of course, she had to go. But how to take the medicine was entirely up to him. The court of Imperial Physicians was a little far from Chushio Palace. Fortunately, there was a soft sedan that was always on standby. They rode the soft bridge all the way to the court of Imperial Physicians and stopped at the entrance of the hospital. Yu Jie stepped forward to hold the door of the sedan and helped Xiao Wanru get off the soft bridge. Looking at the plaque on the door of the court of Imperial Physicians and the open door of the courtyard, Xiao Wanru frowned. It was a coincidence that the door was open, but there was no one there. The two of them stepped in, and a little eunuch was coming out. He was stunned when he saw Xiao Wanru and her servant. He didn't dare to recognize her because he didn't know her identity, but he was sure that she was a master. What can I do for you, master? The little eunuch asked with a clever smile and was very kind. Is there no imperial physician in the court of Imperial Physicians at this time? Xiao Wanru asked. Now is the time for the night shift. The imperial physician who was on duty last night has already gone back. The imperial physician who is on duty today will be here for a while. Just wait for a while, he should be here soon. The little eunuch answered with a smile. Hearing his words, Xiao Wanru was stunned for a moment. She really didn't know about it. Everyone in the imperial palace knew that there were imperial physicians on duty in the court of Imperial Physicians. There were imperial physicians on duty 24 hours a day. How could they be absent for a period of time? Shouldn't the court of Imperial Physicians on duty wait until other imperial physicians come? Yu Jie looked at the court of Imperial Physicians in front of her, which was much quieter, and asked curiously. This was something that almost everyone in the imperial palace knew. If there were no imperial physicians in the court of Imperial Physicians, what could they do if the masters in the imperial palace got sick? It would be a big deal. The imperial physicians shouldn't be so bold to do such a thing. The little eunuch understood the meaning of Yu Jie's words. He shook his head with a smile and said, There are many imperial physicians on duty in the imperial palace. Some are in other places, but in the court of Imperial Physicians, the imperial physicians on duty can leave early. If the masters in the imperial palace have something urgent, they can go to other places to find the imperial physicians on duty. There are imperial physicians on duty in Chushio Palace now. His words were quite clear, and Xiao Wanru immediately understood. The court of Imperial Physicians was the base camp of the imperial physicians, but not all imperial physicians were on duty here. Some imperial physicians went to other palaces to take turns in case something happened. For example, when there were many people in Chushio Palace, it might be necessary. For example, there should be imperial physicians by the emperor's side and the empress dowager's side. Even if the imperial physicians in the court of Imperial Physicians were absent for a period of time, they could go to other places to ask imperial physicians for urgent matters. Why are they absent? Xiao Wanru asked with a smile. In fact, they don't have to be absent. Her words made the little eunuch look bitter. It's true that they didn't have to be absent before, but after the imperial physicians in Chushio Palace took turns to be on duty, the imperial physicians in the court of Imperial Physicians were too busy. Later, I reported it to the empress, and the empress also agreed to do so. In this way, the court of Imperial Physicians could be turned over. Did the empress mean? Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat. It was agreed by the empress. Master, do you have something urgent? If it's really urgent, you can go to other places to ask for imperial physicians. The little eunuch answered casually. It seemed that the master in front of him didn't have something urgent. Otherwise, she wouldn't have talked so much with him. I want some painkillers. My big sister is injured. Now she is in the palace and can't sleep well at night. Xiao Wanru said vaguely. She was injured in the palace, and she was wearing her master's clothes. She didn't look like a master in the palace. The little eunuch felt that she looked more like those misses from aristocratic families in Chushio Palace. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that she looked like her. He hesitated for a moment and asked, "The first miss of Duke Xing's mansion?" It was said that the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion was injured and was now recuperating in the Empress's place. It seemed that no one else was injured, and it seemed that they were seriously injured. They even needed to use painkillers at night. My master is the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion. She wants to ask for some painkillers. Yujia took a step forward, raised her head and said, "She is the fifth Miss Xiao. We have painkillers. Fifth Miss, please come in with me," the little eunuch said with a smile. He led the way and led her into a pharmacy. The pharmacy was densely packed with medicine cabinets, which were much more than those in ordinary pharmacies. "Fifth Miss, I don't know any medical skills and I don't know how to read. Fifth Miss, you can see which one you need." The little eunuch pointed at a long row of medicine cabinets with a smile and said, there was a note on each of the medicine cabinets, indicating what kind of medicinal materials were inside. This was not a problem for Xiao Wanru and her servant at all. Yujia took a step forward and was about to check it, but Xiao Wanru gently pulled her sleeve. "Little eunuch, you don't know how to read?" Xiao Wanru asked softly. "Yes, I don't know how to read." Almost all the servants in the Imperial Institute of Medicine are illiterate, except for the Imperial physician's disciples. The little eunuch explained with a smile. Xiao Wanru had never dealt with people in the Imperial Institute of Medicine in her last life. At least in her memory, there was no Imperial Institute of Medicine, so she didn't know such a rule in the Imperial Institute of Medicine. But after thinking about it carefully, she found it appropriate. The most precious thing in the Imperial Institute of Medicine was the medical records of the emperor and his concubines. This kind of thing couldn't be seen casually. It was better for the ordinary people who cleaned up this kind of thing to be illiterate, so that the medical records could not be spread out. "Little eunuch, have you seen other imperial physicians take painkillers?" After thinking it through, Xiao Wanru asked softly with a trace of deepness in her eyes. Xiao Yinru lived in the side hall of the Empress's Fengyi Palace, but she still knew this kind of thing. It could be seen that someone was secretly helping her. She should have had feelings for Prince Xian since the first time Prince Xian came to visit her, but she hadn't found a suitable opportunity and hadn't made up her mind. Now it seemed that it was an opportunity for her to take action. And she should be that medicine. "I actually know something, but I'm afraid I can't grasp it." The little eunuch was clever. Although he was illiterate, the nobles in the palace were very delicate. When they were sick, they would use painkillers. This was a very common medicine. The little eunuch had seen the imperial physicians use this medicine many times. However, the little eunuch was a cautious person. He was afraid that he would make a mistake, so he deliberately said so. "Little eunuch, can you take me to have a look?" Xiao Wanru said softly with a smile. Seeing that her attitude had been very calm and made people have a good impression on her, the little eunuch became bold. He took Xiao Wanru to the medicine cabinet in the first row on the right, pointed to a medicine cabinet in the middle and said, "Fifth Miss, can you see if it is this one?" This was the place that the imperial physicians used most in the past. Xiao Wanru looked up at the words on the note in the middle and found that it was really a painkiller. "This one. Little eunuch, please get some for me, okay?" Xiao Wanru nodded. Seeing that Xiao Wanru had determined this medicine, the little eunuch skillfully turned around and took a paper bag. He grabbed a handful and put them into the paper bag one by one, and then wrapped it up and handed it to Yujia. Yujia was about to reach out to take it, but was stopped by Xiao Wanru. "Little eunuch, can you please put a few more paper bags outside, in case the medicine smells all the way?" Xiao Wanru's attitude was very gentle. This was not a difficult thing to do. The little eunuch nodded and said yes. He put 2 more paper bags outside. When he felt that there was no medicine smell, he handed the paper bags to Yujie. After thanking the little eunuch, Xiao Wanru took Yujie out of the gate of the Imperial Institute of Medicine. It didn't take long for them to enter and leave. The Imperial physician on duty hadn't come yet. It seemed that there was a shortage of Imperial physicians in the Imperial Institute of Medicine recently. Chapter 787. After coming out of the Imperial Institute of Medicine, Xiao Wanru got on the soft sedan chair, followed by Yujie with a paper bag in her hand. The soft sedan chair went all the way to the side hall of the Fengyi Palace and then stopped outside the hall. There was a small side door in the side hall, which made it convenient for Xiao Wanru to enter. Moreover, she didn't have to go to the main entrance of the Fengyi Palace, which saved her a lot of trouble. After entering the room, Xiao Yanru saw Xiao Yanru lying on the couch by the window with a weak look. She was dressed neatly, but her face was still pale and bloodless, which made her look very sick and weak. Her hair was a little fluffy and she looked a little tired, which made her look delicate and pitiful. However, although her hair was a little messy, it was not ugly. Instead, she looked different from her usual dignified look, which was very different from her usual dignified look. However, in such a weak situation, even if someone thought that she was different from before, it didn't matter. It was normal for her to be unable to maintain her previous aura when she was weak. In the past few days, Xiao Yanru had been changing her state quietly. She had changed her previous dignified look into the current pitiful and fragile look. In the last life, when Xiao Wanru met Xiao Yanru, she had already been the emperor's concubine. Xiao Yanru had always been high and mighty in front of her. Sometimes, she would put on airs and pretend to be very decent and gentle. When she saw Xiao Wanru being trampled on by her subordinates, she would show a sympathetic look, which meant that Xiao Wanru asked for it. She had intended to let Xiao Wanru go kindly. Xiao Wanru had never seen Xiao Yanru like this before. Xiao Yanru glanced at Xiao Yanru's light clothes, which were very tight-fitting and set off her exquisite figure. At the age of 17 or 18, Xiao Yanru was in the prime of her life. With her slender waist tied tightly, her breasts were raised high. Even though Xiao Wanru was more beautiful, she had to admit that Xiao Yanru's figure was more beautiful at this moment. Because the collar was a little loose, she looked inexplicably enchanting. Today, Xiao Yanru was really well prepared. "Big sister, are you feeling better today?" Xiao Wanru stepped forward and asked lightly. It was a routine question, which she would ask every day when she came over. "I'm all right," Xiao Yanru said lazily. After that, she covered her plump chest, turned sideways and coughed twice. Then she turned around and said weakly, "Fifth sister, please put the painkillers into the medicine prescribed by the Imperial physician and boil them together." Xiao Wanru nodded. Yujie left and went to give the medicine to the palace maid. "Big sister, why did you get up today?" Xiao Wanru sat down in a chair beside her, picked up the teacup at hand, took a sip and asked, "I've been lying here for a long time. I'm so lazy that I've lost my bones. I have to get up to sit and walk. If my body gets better soon, I can go back to the manor. It's not good to always stay in the Empress side hall." Xiao Yanru lowered her head and said with a sigh, "I don't have any hope now. I only hope that fifth sister can get what she wants. After all, as a member of our Duke Xing's mansion, I can't let others look down on us." Her words were very honest, as if she really wanted to flatter Xiao Wanru wholeheartedly. The four misses of this generation of Duke Xing's mansion entered the palace for the draft, but for various reasons, Xiao Wanru was the only one left now. Indeed, they could only put all their hopes on her. Before the draft, Xiao Yanru was a popular candidate. Now that she had ended up like this, anyone would feel disheartened. There was nothing wrong with her current state. Moreover, she had survived a disaster. She had figured out some things that she couldn't figure out, and she didn't want to fight for those things that she originally wanted to fight for. Without the reason to fight for victory in the past, it was natural for Xiao Yanru to show her concern for Xiao Wanru. Young girls fought with their sisters for jewelry, the attention of the elders, and even for resources in the mansion. But now in the palace, sometimes they fought for their lives. They almost lost their lives. What else could they not think about? Compared to one's own life, things like jewelry were too shallow. Xiao Yanru felt that her current performance should satisfy Xiao Wanru and make her let down her guard. She thought that even though she had harmed Xiao Wanru several times in the past, she had always been thorough in doing things and often hid behind the scenes. Xiao Wanru should not notice much. At most, Xiao Wanru would think that she was a helper of her mother and grandmother. Now that she showed weakness, Xiao Wanru should not let down her guard. First Miss, Fifth Miss, Prince Xen is here. Han Dan came in from outside and reported. Xiao Wanru took a sip of tea in silence. The master here was Xiao Yanru, so she didn't need to stand up for her. Invite Prince Xen in, Xiao Yanru said. She moved slightly, and Shuqi hurriedly helped her sit up. Chu Liuxin strode in. Seeing that Xiao Yanru had sat up and dressed up, he looked her up and down in surprise and asked, First Miss Xiao, have you recovered? In the past, when he came to visit her, a gauze curtain fell in the middle of the room. The gauze curtain was not thick, but he could only vaguely see the figures inside. He saw Xiao Yanru lying on the bed and Xiao Wanru sitting on one side and looking silent. I'm a little better. Thank you for visiting me, Your Highness, Xiao Yanru said softly. Her voice was gentle but weak. She raised her beautiful eyes, which were so gentle that tears almost dripped from them. She looked quite pitiful in sickness. Coupled with her slender waist and towering breasts, she looked particularly attractive and distressing. At this moment, any normal man would be moved by the beauty in front of him. Xiao Wanru glanced at Chu Liuxin's face calmly. It was obvious that he had not been enlightened. When he looked at such a beauty, there was only joy in his eyes, without any other meaning. That's great. If the first miss recovers, the fifth miss doesn't have to be so tired and go back and forth between Chuxiu Palace and Fengyi Palace every day. Chu Liuxin said in a good mood. He did not notice that Xiao Yanru's face was a little stiff because of his words. Chu Liuxin had taken a fancy to Xiao Wanru. Originally, he wanted to find an opportunity to propose marriage. Unexpectedly, the first Miss Xiao, who was also a sister of the same mansion, had an accident. If he asked his father to propose marriage at this time, he would definitely provoke his father's anger. Moreover, his mother had repeatedly warned him not to act rashly during this period of time, and also asked him to stay away from the sisters of Duke Xing's mansion. However, Chu Liuxin did not think so. It was a good opportunity to visit Xiao Wanru. Therefore, he often came to the Fengyi Palace with the excuse of paying respects to the Empress, and then specially came to see Xiao Yanru. Of course, his main purpose was to see Xiao Wanru. In his mind, Xiao Yanru was the fifth Miss Xiao's eldest cousin sister, and there was nothing else. He came here to talk with Xiao Yanru most enthusiastically, but in fact his attention had been on Xiao Wanru. However, Xiao Wanru seemed to have something on her mind and was very depressed. When he asked her, she only gave a simple answer, so he could not continue the conversation. Fortunately, Xiao Yanru was here. Fifth Miss, if the first miss goes back to the mansion, you can have a good rest, Chu Liuxin said to Xiao Wanru with a smile. Xiao Wanru raised her head, smiled slightly and nodded, but did not answer. Your Highness, you are right. During this period of time, fifth sister has not been able to eat and sleep well because of me. After I leave the palace, I will definitely send some good tonics to fifth sister to nourish her body. Xiao Yanru restrained the anger in her heart, said softly with a smile, and looked at Xiao Wanru with gratitude in her eyes. Seeing that Xiao Wanru ignored him as usual, Chu Liuxin did not care too much and nodded repeatedly to Xiao Yanru's words. Then he looked at Xiao Yanru's complexion and said, thinking that he knew it very well, the first Miss Xiao looks much better. It seems that you are almost as good as the fifth Mississippi. You should be able to leave the palace. Why don't I tell my mother later and ask her to send you out of the palace? Chu Liuxin thought that he meant well, and his words were decent, but Xiao Yanru was so angry that she almost couldn't control herself. She pinched her leg hard with her hand on her knee, which almost made her scream. He said that as if she had dragged Xiao Wanru down and couldn't wait to drive her out of the palace. Was Chu Liuxin really her choice? If it was possible, she really didn't want to choose Chu Liuxin, but there was no other way at the moment. Chu Liuxin was the best choice. Compared with the romantic Chu Luiyue, even the reckless Chu Liuzhou, Chu Liuxin was too insensitive. Xiao Yanru had always known how to deal with men. She didn't want to say anything in any situation, but now she felt that it was easy for her to get along with Chu Liuxin. Couldn't he see that she was a beautiful, fragile, and helpless beauty who was in trouble? What was so good about Xiao Wanru? Except that her face was slightly better than hers, what else could she compare with? She almost couldn't control her anger, but she had to put on a gentle smile and said, "Your Highness, you're right. Fifth sister is indeed tired. Just now, she said that she wanted to go out for a walk and get some fresh air. The smell of medicine in this room is really uncomfortable." Xiao Yanru gently waved the handkerchief in front of her nose, looking a little charming. Xiao Wanru stood up calmly, bowed slightly to Chu Liuxin, and said, "Your Highness, I do want to go out for a walk, so I can't accompany you anymore." Xiao Yanru was lying in front of her, but this kind of lie was harmless. Even if she exposed her, it was of no use. Everyone said that they were right, which made others laugh at her. Originally, she wanted to find a chance to go out. If she didn't go out, she couldn't perform the next play. Xiao Yanru thought so, and so did she. It was a suitable way to get out of this situation. "I happen to be tired too." Seeing that Xiao Wanru wanted to go out for a walk, Chu Liuxin was overjoyed and wanted to go out with her. It was rare to have such a chance to accompany a beauty, so he had to seize the opportunity. Eunuch Lu had said that he had to have a chance to please girls. He, who had no chance, had to seize every opportunity. "Your Highness, I still have a request to ask you. Please listen to me." Xiao Yanru interrupted him with a smile. Chapter 788. Hearing the delicate girl's words, Chu Liuxin couldn't refuse and could only watch Xiao Wanru leave. In fact, he didn't want to hear what the first Miss Xiao had to say at all. He just wanted to hear what the fifth Miss Xiao had to say, but he had no choice. He sat down helplessly and said weakly, "First Miss, please tell me what you want to say." If she had something to say, he could go out for a walk after that. Thinking of this, he felt a little better and showed a smile on his face. Xiao Wanru lifted the curtain and walked out of the door. She was wearing a lot of clothes, so the cold air outside made her feel very comfortable. She stood in the corridor and turned to the small room beside the side hall. In this case, she would add some fuel to the fire, lest Xiao Yanru came up with other tricks. A palace maid was boiling medicine inside. Seeing Xiao Wanru come over, she hurriedly put down the palm leaf fan in her hand and bowed to Xiao Wanru. "It's not done yet?" Xiao Wanru pointed to the medicine pot on the stove. "Fifth Miss, it's almost done. Wait a little longer." The palace maid nodded. "Have you put the medicine in just now?" Xiao Wanru looked at the medicine pot that was already steaming and asked. The medicine was not ready after it was boiled. It had to be boiled slowly to boil out the liquid in the dregs. This process had to be done quickly, otherwise the medicine would not be so effective. "I've put it in. Next, I'll boil it slowly." The palace maid nodded and said. The painkiller was not a big deal. She could put some in the dregs and boil it together. Xiao Wanru nodded and said, "Don't worry about me. Just be careful." The palace maid didn't dare to walk away. She squatted by the stove attentively, picked up the palm leaf fan, and fanned the fire again. Xiao Wanru walked into the room and saw some messy papers on the table on the right, which were basically the paper wrapped before the medicine was to be boiled. The medicine was very thick, and the paper packets she brought from the Imperial Institute of Medicine were also mixed in it. Xiao Wanru sat down on the round stool beside the table, supported her head with one hand, and rummaged through the packets of medicines scattered on the table in boredom. Suddenly, she smelled a strange smell and her eyes suddenly became gloomy. She picked up a small paper bag from the mess of papers, put it to her nose and sniffed it. Then she realized that she had guessed right. Xiao Yanru had prepared it long ago. He found what he was looking for and looked at the time of the medicine. There was still some time before it could be consumed. He stood up and walked out with Yu Jie. In the past, she occasionally came to check on Xiao Yanru's decoction, but the palace maid who decocted the decoction didn't care about it. He came out of the house and slowly walked out of the corridor. When he saw Han Dan rushing over, he gave Yu Jie a look. Yu Jie stepped forward and stopped Han Dan. "Fetch a basin of water for Miss Wu to wash her hands." Yu Jie ordered. Han Dan could only stop, go to another small room, pour a basin of water, and put it in the corridor at the door of the room. Han Dan came over and reached out to wash it. Actually, she didn't really need to wash her hands. She just rubbed her hands for a short period of time. She didn't use much strength, and the medicinal smell wasn't strong either. Han Dan, where did you go just now? Why don't I see you serving the first miss here? Yu Jie took advantage of this time to ask Han Dan. Han Dan didn't dare to hide anything in front of Xiao Wanru. The first miss said that if Prince Exine came over, she would ask me to meet the chief supervisor of the Fengyi Palace. What did she say? Xiao Wanru took the handkerchief from Yu Jie's hand, wiped the water on her hands and asked. Ask the chief supervisor to come over later and say that the first miss has something to discuss with him. Then ask the chief supervisor to report it to the Empress. It was not easy for Xiao Yenru to meet the Empress directly. Even if there was something important, she had to go through the chief supervisor of the Fengyi Palace first. In fact, she couldn't meet the chief supervisor of the Empress immediately. She could only ask him to come over later. The chief supervisor said that he would come over later? Xiao Wanru asked calmly. Some things slowly converged into a line and slowly combined with some things in her memory, so that she could see more clearly. The chief supervisor said that he would come over later. The emperor is now at the Empress's place, so he can't leave for a while. Han Dan said calmly. The first miss didn't expect that the chief supervisor would come over immediately. The chief supervisor is the chief supervisor of the Fengyi Palace, and there are always things like this and that. Moreover, he has to serve the Empress. The first miss said that I don't need to care about what he said. Han Dan stole a glance at Xiao Wanru with complicated feelings. In fact, she thought that the first Miss Xiao was very powerful. She could even guess the chief supervisor's reaction, but the fifth Miss Xiao was even more powerful. Being sandwiched between the two misses, Han Dan also felt a little regretful at this moment. She just wanted to find a master, but now it seemed that she had found two masters for herself. Moreover, the two masters were at loggerheads with each other. Ignoring the hesitation in Han Dan's eyes, Xiao Wanru's eyes became slightly sharp. Xiao Yenru was really thoughtful, and she even took the Empress's reaction into account. The chief supervisor was the Empress's subordinate, so he certainly knew what the Empress was thinking. The Empress didn't like Xiao Yenru now, so she deliberately delayed the matter and punished Xiao Yenru from the Empress's perspective. Whether there was something wrong or not, the chief supervisor would definitely not be on call, and he might even delay the matter for a long time. This period of time was enough for Xiao Yenru. The medicine was still boiling on the fire, and it would take some time. Make another trip to see the head steward. After thinking for a while, Xiao Wanru said, Tell him that Prince Exin is also here and ask him to come over earlier. Prince Exin was really innocent. She couldn't let Prince Exin be killed by Xiao Yenru. If she went in earlier, she could ruin Xiao Yenru's plan and catch her off guard. Han Dan looked at Xiao Wanru in surprise. She meant that she could suppress the chief supervisor with the identity of Prince Exin, but could it work? The chief supervisor of the Fengyi Palace was the Empress's subordinate. Even Prince Exin had to call her the chief supervisor politely when he met her. It was impossible to frighten the chief supervisor with the identity of Prince Exin. Even she, a little palace maid, knew this. There was no reason that the fifth Miss Xiao didn't know this. Go ahead. Just say it like that. If someone asks you what Prince Xin is doing, just be vague. Xiao Wanru said. If she came quickly, she could definitely stop this matter. Yes, I'll go right away. Han Dan didn't dare to say more. She answered and went back. When she arrived in front of the main hall of the Fengyi Palace, she saw the chief supervisor of the Fengyi Palace standing on the side of the road. She trotted over excitedly. When she was about to speak, she glanced at a yellow brocade robe out of the corner of her eye. She was so scared that her face turned pale and she hurriedly knelt down with a plop. In the palace, only the emperor was allowed to wear yellow robes. She trotted over. In fact, she had already alarmed the people present. The emperor was light and there was no one else around him except the chief supervisor of the Fengyi Palace. Of course, the guards who followed him in secret would not show up in front of everyone. Little palace maid, what's the matter? Do you know that disturbing the emperor is a felony punishable by death? The chief supervisor of the Fengyi Palace was also shocked and rebuked sternly. The emperor waved his hand, and the chief eunuch beside him just went to get a file left in the empress's room. Your Majesty, I am the palace maid of the first Miss Xiao of Duke Xing's mansion. I'm willing to die for disturbing the emperor. Han Dan stammered and her face turned pale with fear. Although she wanted to curry favor with Xiao Yenru and hoped to get a chance to climb up the ranks in the palace, she had not realized it until now, nor had she really met the emperor. The emperor naturally knew the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion. He frowned and said in a deep voice, "What's the matter?" Although his two sons said that what happened that day was a misunderstanding and had nothing to do with the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion, the emperor had seen many things, so how could he not notice that there was something fishy in it? If he continued to investigate it, he would also lose face, so he simply gave up. Forget it. This did not mean that he had a good impression of Xiao Yenru. A woman actually provoked his two sons to fight. From this point of view, the emperor was extremely dissatisfied with Xiao Yenru. He thought that this woman was not suitable to be a legal princess if she was discontented with her husband. Fortunately, he didn't make a good choice. If she really married into the prince's mansion of one of his sons and had an affair with the other son, it was hard to say what more incredible scandal would happen at that time. Your Majesty, the first miss asked me to invite the chief executive over. She said that Prince Xian is also here. Invite the chief executive to go there. She has something to say. Han Dan stammered and finally finished the matter. She was flustered and scared at this time, so her words were somewhat incoherent. But in general, she had sorted out and explained the matter clearly. The emperor's face became colder and colder, and a trace of fierceness flashed in his eyes. It had been Chu Luiyue and Chu Liuzhou before, and now it was Chu Liuxin. The first miss of Duke Xing's mansion was really discontented with her husband. Let's go. Take me to have a look, the emperor said. Originally, he was going to go back to the Imperial study, but at this time, he was not in the mood. He turned around coldly and wanted to see what this woman was going to do. If she really did anything against the rules, he would definitely kill her. Seeing the emperor turn around, the chief executive of Fengyi Palace was also a little stunned. He did not understand why the emperor was interested in this kind of thing, but he reacted very quickly. He said goodbye to Han Dan and hurriedly chased after her to lead the way. Han Dan also got up in a hurry and followed the two of them to the side hall, trembling. In the side hall, the medicine had been served and placed on the table, right in front of Chu Liuxin. The medicine was very hot, so he could not drink it for a while. The smell of the medicine was very strong, and it was in front of him. Chu Liuxin raised his nose and smelled it, but he also felt that it smelled bad. But this was medicine for wounds, so he could not say anything. Moreover, what Xiao Yenru said was something that interested him. She talked about some trivial things about Xiao Wanru, including what happened after she returned to the mansion and the inexplicable fire in her courtyard. Xiao Yenru said that she was not in the mansion at that time. If she was in the mansion, she would definitely protect Xiao Wanru and think that she could not let Xiao Wanru be bullied. Chu Liuxin nodded repeatedly and also felt regretful. If he had known that he would like Xiao Wanru, he should have gone to Duke Xing's mansion to protect her at that time and never let her suffer such a great grievance. But he did not know if it was because he was wearing too much, but he felt hot for a moment. Looking at Chu Liuxin smelling the rising smoke in the medicine bowl in front of him, Xiao Yenru showed a trace of complacency on her face. It would be done in a while. Chapter 789. Remember in 1 second, 800 $say, net, where is Prince Xian? The emperor stood outside the side hall and asked sternly. Outside the side hall, Shuqi stood there with a pale face. She looked at the emperor in a daze and then knelt down with a thud. Outside the side hall, Shuqi stood there with a pale face. She stared at the emperor in a daze and then knelt down with a thud. Why was the emperor here? How could the emperor be here? Wasn't it the chief executive who brought some people here? How could it not be the chief executive? Even if she didn't know the emperor, Who else could wear such clothes in the palace except the emperor? Where is Prince Exin? Seeing the servant girl standing outside the door and some distance away from the door, the emperor became more and more furious. He strode forward, lifted his hand and went straight into the room. A man and a woman were alone together, but even the servant girl was not in the room. What did Xiao Jing's daughter want to do? In the room, Chu Liuxin closed his eyes and felt increasingly hot. Xiao Yanru, who was in front of him, looked more and more delicate and attractive. Her watery eyes seemed to contain all kinds of amorous feelings, which made him unconsciously want to see clearly the watery color in Xiao Yanru's eyes. Suddenly hearing a voice coming from the door, Chu Liuxin turned around and was surprised to see his father standing at the door. The heat in his heart, which had been surging, immediately seemed to be extinguished. It was as if a basin of cold water had been poured over him from head to toe. "Father," he murmured, "get out." The emperor looked at him and said coldly, "Father, I didn't." Chu Liuxin also noticed that something was wrong just now and was anxious to explain. "Get out." The emperor rebuked him with a gloomy face. Chu Liuxin did not dare to explain anymore and hurriedly ran out of the door. When he ran outside, he took a deep breath. After the cold air swept away the heat that was still rolling in his body, he suddenly felt a sense of horror. Just now, he felt that Xiao Yanru was very beautiful, and she was the most beautiful one. He even had a feeling of holding her in his arms and taking good care of her. He liked Xiao Wanru, the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion. When did he have such an idea about Xiao Yanru? He obviously wanted to get closer to the fifth Miss Xiao when the first Miss Xiao was sick. But what happened to him just now? He rubbed his forehead and frowned. There was a heavy and shameful feeling in his heart. How could he do this? Fifth Highness. The chief steward of the Phoenix Ritual Palace giggled as she walked to his side. "Father, why are you here?" Chu Liuxin calmed down, forced himself to maintain the indifference on his face, and asked. "His Majesty heard that you were here, so he came to have a look. Was Prince Exen here just now?" The chief steward looked behind him and asked uneasily. There was obviously something wrong with the situation today. As soon as the emperor heard that Prince Exen was with the first Miss Xiao, he immediately came over angrily. Could it be that there was something else going on? Suddenly he thought of something, took a deep breath, and narrowed his eyes. He still remembered what had happened between Prince Zhou and Prince Exen. Could it be the same for the emperor? The first Miss Xiao was really not simple. She could actually attract so many people, and they were the royal father, son, and brothers. She must report to the empress and let the empress decide. The chief steward was the chief steward of the Phoenix Ritual Palace, not the chief eunuch of the emperor, so she didn't understand the emperor's mind. She rolled her eyes and felt that the current situation was beyond her control. She took a few steps out, waved to a little eunuch who was sweeping outside the door, and whispered a few words to him. The little eunuch threw down the broom, turned around, and trotted to the empress to report. Xiao Wanru came out of the small room on the side and glanced at Chu Liuxin, who was standing outside in a daze. The moment he saw Xiao Wanru, Chu Liuxin became more ashamed and blushed. He didn't know how to face Xiao Wanru. With a blush, he swung his sleeves and strode away. He didn't know how to face Xiao Wanru now. At the moment in the room just now, he actually had a crush on Xiao Yanru. This was something he had never expected. How could he be interested in Xiao Yanru? He obviously liked Xiao Wanru and wanted Xiao Wanru to be his princess. His mind was in a mess and he didn't have the face to face Xiao Wanru. Especially at this time, he had a feeling of being caught in bed by Xiao Wanru. Chu Liuxin was so upset that he was not in the mood to stay at this time. "Miss, what's wrong with Prince Exen?" Seeing Chu Liuxin turn around and leave without saying a word, Yu Jie asked curiously. Xiao Wanru shook her head. Her eyes fell on the chief steward of the Phoenix Ritual Palace. Judging from the eunuch's clothes, she should be the chief steward of the Phoenix Ritual Palace. She frowned. Although she was in the small room just now, she saw clearly that the emperor came and drove Chu Liuxin out. So it was the emperor in the room now? She unconsciously stirred her handkerchief and frowned slightly. There was a different feeling in her heart. So, did this matter have to go according to the script in the previous life? Would Xiao Yanru still be the Emperor's Zhao Yi in this life? Xiao Yanru put an aphrodisiac powder in the bowl of medicine. This kind of powder didn't need to be eaten. It would take effect just by smelling it. Xiao Yanru's cleaning today and her action of making Chu Liuxin stay showed that she had feelings for Chu Liuxin. She was afraid that Chu Liuxin was not interested in her, so she came up with this idea. Even if he found out something, it had nothing to do with her. She was just a victim, and she was the one who had dealt with the powder. It was she who had been to the Imperial Institute of Medicine, so it was possible that she had come into contact with this powder. At that time, there was no one in the Imperial Institute of Medicine, so the little eunuch took her to get the medicine. The little eunuch didn't know the powder, but there were marks in each medicine cabinet. If he could read, it would be easy for him to distinguish it. In addition, she knew some medical knowledge, so it was normal for her to know the special functions of some powder. She and Xiao Yanru didn't get along well, so she deliberately put some aphrodisiac powder in Xiao Yanru's painkillers and decocted it in the medicine she usually took. If something happened, she would be the one who hurt her. Even if Xiao Yanru, who was hurt, lost her reputation, it was her fault. She was innocent. With the support of Duke Xing's mansion, she could become Princess Xen anyway. In order to frame her, she had even prepared the medicine bag early. In the room where she had decocted the medicine, there was a small package of paper in the pile of messy papers, which gave off such a smell. The package of paper was placed there, and anyone could smell it. If someone came to check, it would be easy to find something. After knowing her plan, she specially asked Han Dan to bring the chief steward of Fengyi Palace over and asked him to bring Chu Liuxin out of the room. Just now, she saw that Chu Liuxin's face was a little red, but it turned red when he saw her. It could be seen that he had not been poisoned much before. But if she waited a little longer, she couldn't guarantee that when Chu Liuxin was deeply poisoned, the chief steward of Fengyi Palace would definitely find something unusual when he went in. But now, because of Chu Liuxin's ashamed and angry expression, no one could guess anything for a while. But she didn't expect that the Emperor would come at this time. Why did the Emperor come at this time? Her fingers twitched, and a trace of confusion flashed across her eyes. Could it be that she really couldn't change anything? She lowered her head slightly to hide the coldness and panic in her eyes. She squeezed the handkerchief in her hand hard to give herself some strength. The chief steward of Fengyi Palace was also stunned when she saw Xiao Wanru come out of the small room on the side. Then she seemed to find something, lowered her head and stood there in a daze without making any sound. She thought that the fifth Miss of Duke Xing's mansion was sensible, much better than the first Miss Xiao who didn't know the rules of unmarried girls. The chief steward also panicked. Did the Emperor have a crush on the first Miss Xiao? If he had known this, he would have advised the Empress to send the carriage away as soon as possible. This was going to make a fool of himself in the Empress's Fengyi Palace. The fifth Miss Xiao in front of him was the real beauty, much better than the first Miss Xiao who pretended to be the most beautiful. The miss of an aristocratic family was not a prostitute who showed her face in public. The first Miss Xiao was displeased to hear the title of the most beautiful woman. Moreover, the first Miss Xiao was restless. If she was allowed to enter the palace, the whole palace would be in chaos. The chief steward was so worried that he didn't have the mood to care about Xiao Wanru. After glancing at her, he lowered his head and thought for a while about what the Empress would say when she came. The Emperor and the first Miss Xiao were alone in the room now. In fact, the chief steward also wanted to go in and keep an eye on the Emperor, but he didn't dare to. He was the Empress's man. If something happened to him if he went in rashly, the Empress wouldn't be able to protect him, so he could only wait here anxiously. The Empress came very soon. It didn't take long for her to come over with a few people, including Durong, the chief eunuch of the Emperor. Seeing the Empress coming, the chief steward of the Fengyi Palace breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly stepped forward to salute. "Greetings, Empress." Xiao Wanru also knelt down in the corridor. The Empress looked at Xiao Wanru in the corridor with a cold face, then looked at the chief steward and said coldly, "Where is the Emperor?" The chief steward pointed inside and said in a low voice, "The Emperor has been in there for a while." The Empress's face changed greatly. She suddenly took 2 steps forward and was about to rush in, but was stopped by Durong. Your Highness, please wait. Let me do it. If there was nothing going on inside, it would be fine for the Empress to go in. If there was something going on inside, the Empress might cause the Emperor to be angry if she rushed in. The Empress took a deep breath and knew that she couldn't be impulsive at this time. She gritted her teeth and said, "Sorry to trouble you, Eunuch Durong." She didn't object to the Emperor taking in. In this consort selection, she originally wanted to select a few concubines for the Emperor to enter the palace. But now this kind of thing happened in her palace, under her nose, and without her knowledge. It was like giving her a hard slap in the face. She was the Empress in the Middle Palace, but such a scandal had happened under her nose. How could she bear it? It was originally done by me, Durong said helplessly. Chapter 790. Durong, the chief eunuch, was really helpless. What the hell was going on? He just went back to the Empress to get something, but the Emperor disappeared when he turned around. When he disappeared, he looked for him. When he was in a panic, the Empress came and said that something had happened to the Emperor. He hurriedly followed the Empress and rushed over. He didn't expect to see such a thing in front of him. In this kind of situation, he had to deal with the aftermath and not make it bigger. Speaking of which, this was indeed a scandal. He walked to the door and knocked on it gently. "Your Majesty, Your Majesty." It was very quiet in the room, and there was no response. After listening, Durong looked uneasy and looked back at the Empress. Seeing that the Empress was so angry that her face was pale and she couldn't suppress it, he could only push the door open and go in. When the door was opened, a stuffy and pungent smell of medicine rushed over. Durong was caught off guard and couldn't help coughing loudly. Hearing his violent coughing, the Emperor's voice came from the inside room. "Durong, come in." "Your Majesty, I'll come in right away," Durong said in a hurry, turned around and went inside, which was slightly blocked by the screen. He lowered his head and didn't dare to look at the scene opposite him. When he came in just now, he had roughly understood the current situation. The first Miss Xiao was crying on the couch, and her clothes were a little messy. The Emperor stood in front of the couch with a frown. "Have someone clean her up." The Emperor strode out. When he went outside and took a breath of fresh air, he felt that the dryness in his heart had been suppressed. Then he met the Emperor's angry eyes. He glanced around and found that there were many people kneeling there. "Your Majesty, I heard that Your Majesty is here, so I specially came over to see what happened." The Empress suppressed the anger in her heart and went forward to salute the Emperor. "Send a palace maid in to help clean her up." The Emperor's face turned cold. He went in just now to ask Xiao Yenru who Xiao Yenru liked. His son was not a cabbage that she could pick and choose. He was really disappointed with the eldest daughter of Duke Xing. It was not enough that she seduced his two sons, but she had the nerve to seduce his youngest son. However, he didn't expect that after entering and asking a few questions, he would feel that the woman in front of him was as beautiful as a fairy. He couldn't help but lean over and hug her. The Emperor had a lot of women and had experienced a lot of things. He always felt that it was a little strange, but he increasingly felt that the woman in front of him was delicate and pitiful. Especially later, she even cried, which was very pitiful. There were even double images in his eyes, as if she was the one in his heart. Then he heard Durong's violent coughing and suddenly woke up. He stood up and threw everything to Durong. Now that he was hit by the cold air, he immediately understood that something was amiss. Hearing the Emperor's words, the Empress's expression changed greatly. She looked at the Emperor in disbelief. Her lips trembled, but she still waved her hand and called the two palace maids in. Imperial physician Xian. The Emperor felt even more strange and felt that he seemed to be bewitched just now. How could he have any thoughts about Xiao Yenru? He knew very well where his heart was. No matter how beautiful Xiao Yenru was, it was impossible for her to enter his heart. The Empress waved her hand, and a little eunuch behind her hurriedly turned around and ran to summon the Imperial physician. There was an Imperial physician in the Fengyi Palace, and it was not far from here. She took a deep breath, suppressed the irritation in her heart, and said, "Your Majesty, you, Empress, how did you manage the Fengyi Palace? How could such a thing happen?" If she was just recovering from her injury, she should have recovered a long time ago. Why didn't you send her out of the palace earlier? The emperor reprimanded her coldly. Your Majesty, The empress was about to cry. She was blamed for such a thing. She was the most innocent and angry one, and she was also the one who was slapped in the face. Check the smell of the medicine in the room, and then check the decoction. Report it to me after finding out the truth, the emperor said coldly and strode out. Durong came out of the room and hurriedly followed behind him. They left together and left the matter to the empress. Sure enough, the mess was thrown to her again. The empress was so angry that her face turned pale and then livid. Then she turned around and walked to the side hall. In the room, Xiao Yanru was sobbing and her face was as pale as snow. It happened so suddenly that she didn't know how to react for a while. She wanted to plot against Chu Liuxin, but why did the emperor come? It was obvious that even if this kind of thing was handled by someone, it should be the empress. Why did the emperor come? She didn't want to enter the palace to accompany the old emperor. She wanted to follow a prince with infinite possibilities in the future. She wanted to ascend to the position of the empress in the future. 2 palace maids came in to help her tidy up her messy clothes and then stood aside. The empress came in. Xiao Yanru hurriedly knelt down in tears. Before she could say anything, she saw the empress slightly lower her body and reach out to slap her hard twice in the face. The corners of Xiao Yanru's mouth immediately cracked, and blood spilled from the corners of her mouth. Empress, Xiao Yanru said in a sad voice. The empress straightened up and looked at the messy things on the couch with disgust. As long as she thought that Xiao Yanru had seduced her son and even had the face to seduce the emperor, she would be so angry that she couldn't wait to kill Xiao Yanru, the bitch. There was actually such a bitch. Old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion had the face to tell her that her granddaughter was dignified and decent. Look at these things, even the women in the brothel were more dignified than her. The empress took a deep breath and tried to suppress the anger in her heart. She sneered coldly and said, Xiao Yanru, I heard that you are also a lady from a noble family and have a reputation of being virtuous. It seems to be fake. It's in vain that you treat you as a treasure in Duke Xing's mansion. Empress, Xiao Yanru said with a pale face. You don't think that you have really won the emperor's favor, do you? There are many beauties in the imperial harem, but all of them are quiet, virtuous, and elegant. There is no one like you. Today, I've really broadened my horizons. The more the empress looked at Xiao Yanru, the more she disliked her. She had just come in from outside and was dressed in thick clothes, while Xiao Yanru in front of her was dressed in thin clothes. It could be seen that she had dressed herself up with a tight belt, which made her look slender and charming. However, this was only seen in the eyes of men, but in the eyes of women, it was obvious that Xiao Yanru was scheming. Thinking of what the emperor had said just now, the empress's anger slowly subsided at this time. What should she say to this girl? Even the emperor was not very concerned about her and felt that someone had plotted against him. Compared with others, the empress could guess a little secret in the emperor's mind. If the emperor fell in love with Xiao Yanru, it was impossible for Xiao Yanru to fall in love with him. The imperial physician came quickly. As soon as he entered the room, he felt that something was wrong. After greeting the empress, he said that there was an aphrodisiac in the air. There was nothing unsightly in the room except a bowl of cold medicine on the table, which gave off an unpleasant smell. The imperial physician came over and first tried it with a silver needle. After finding nothing, he took a small drop and licked it. Then he reported to the empress, Your Highness, there is an aphrodisiac in this medicine. How could it be possible? Xiao Yanru knelt on the ground, shivered all over, looked straight into the air, and said, This medicine is for me to drink. It was meant for me to drink. Did you drink it? The empress asked with her eyes lowered. I took a sip, but I didn't finish it. I was going to finish it, but it was too hot and a little cold. Then I saw the emperor coming. I drank it all. Xiao Yanru burst into tears. At that moment, she had calmed down a little. At this moment, she cried in front of the empress's feet and turned pale. It seemed that the medicine was for Xiao Yanru. If Xiao Yanru had drunk it, she might have done something more rude when the emperor was here just now. Go and bring the palace maid who decocted the medicine here, the empress said sternly. If this matter was related to the murder of the emperor, it would not be a trivial matter at present. The palace maid who decocted the medicine was called over and knelt beside Xiao Yanru, shivering. She was the one who decocted the medicine in the past. At this time, she didn't know what had happened. Could it be that there was something wrong with the medicine? She was just a little palace maid and was most afraid of this kind of thing. Why is there something else in the medicine? Who gave it to you? The empress asked. The palace maid was trembling uncontrollably and said, Your Highness, I didn't put anything in it. Just the same as before. There's nothing else. Nothing else? Did you find anything different from the past? The chief supervisor of Ferney Palace looked at the palace maid and asked. Judging from the palace maid's look, she really didn't know anything. Moreover, if this kind of thing really involved the emperor, it would not be so easy to get someone involved. At present, it could not prove that the palace maid really had nothing to do with it. The palace maid was frightened and didn't know what to say for a moment. After a long while, she suddenly remembered something and said, It's 5th Miss Xiao. Yes, it's 5th Miss Xiao. She brought the painkiller and decocted it into the 1st Miss's medicine. Where is 5th Miss Xiao? The empress said with a sullen face. She's just outside the door. Shall I call you in? The chief supervisor of Ferney Palace said carefully. The empress suppressed her anger and didn't let it out at this time, so she had to be more careful. The empress nodded with a cold face. Now she felt very uncomfortable when she heard the words, Duke Xing's mansion. None of the mansions were good. Xiao Wanru was led in, and then she knelt in front of the empress and bowed to the empress. Looking at Xiao Wanru, who was relatively calm, the empress slowly breathed out and then her face relaxed. Get up. Chapter 791. Xiao Wanru stood up and stood aside with her head bowed. She looked extremely respectful and didn't look at Xiao Yanru, who was kneeling on the ground and crying. 5th Miss Xiao, I heard that you brought some medicinal materials for the 1st Miss Xiao to relieve her pain. You put them in her medicine and decocted them for her? The empress asked. Xiao Wanru replied extremely calmly, Your Majesty, it is true. Early this morning, Big Sister said that she was not in good health and couldn't sleep at night because of the pain, so she asked me to go to the Imperial Institute of Medicine. Big Sister sent someone here, and the people in Chuxiu Palace should also know about it. Although Han Dan came early, the people in Chuxiu Palace came early recently, so someone must have seen her. You can't sleep at night because of the pain? The empress looked at Xiao Yanru and asked coldly, Is the medicine prescribed by the imperial physician not good? Your Majesty, the 1st Miss Xiao has been taking the medicine prescribed by me these days, and her injury is much better than before. It's unlikely that she can't sleep at night because of the pain, the imperial physician said in a hurry. When he entered the door and saw such a big scene, he knew that something had happened. Even the imperial physician in the imperial palace had good eyesight. If it wasn't for something serious, the empress wouldn't have come to such a remote side hall. A few days ago, even if the 1st Miss Xiao was seriously injured, the empress didn't send someone to ask about her, let alone come here in person. She's much better. It's impossible for her to feel pain? The empress repeated with a sneer. Xiao Yanru's face changed. She wiped her tears and said sadly, Your Majesty, I'm really in pain. I don't know why, but I suddenly felt a sharp pain last night, so I sent someone to ask my 5th sister to go to the Imperial Institute of Medicine. She just gritted her teeth and said that she was in pain. Hearing her words, the imperial physician hesitated for a moment. Everyone's physique was different. Even if most people didn't feel pain, some people would still feel pain. It was not incomprehensible. Maybe, some people are different and feel pain differently. The imperial physician hesitated for a moment and had to explain. 5th Miss went to the Imperial Institute of Medicine and asked which imperial physician took the medicine. The empress didn't insist on whether it hurt or not and continued to ask. When I went there, There happened to be no imperial physician in the Imperial Institute of Medicine on duty. A young eunuch asked me to get the medicine, Xiao Wanru said as usual. It was as if not knowing that she had gone to get it herself was already her biggest suspect. Fifth younger sister took the medicine herself? Didn't an imperial physician give it to you? Could it be fifth sister took the wrong medicine? Xiao Yinru looked at Xiao Wanru and choked with tears all over her face. It seemed that she was protecting Xiao Wanru. If it weren't for the emperor, the empress might also think that Xiao Yinru was a kind person. But at this time, the more she looked at her, the more she felt that she was scheming. The empress didn't look at Xiao Yinru at all, as if she didn't hear her words at all. She just asked Xiao Wanru, "What did the fifth miss say?" Xiao Yinru felt embarrassed and uncomfortable. She could only bite her lip and lower her head. She had planned to say something, but now the empress completely ignored her existence, so she couldn't do anything for the time being. Fortunately, she had planned it well at that time and was afraid of what would happen if the matter was exposed. At present, it seemed that the original decision was still very effective. No matter how the matter went, she was innocent. It was Xiao Wanru who intended to harm her. All the trouble was caused by Xiao Wanru. Now even the emperor had been schemed against. She wanted to see what else she could say. Even if her grandmother was and great elder princess was nothing in front of the emperor. Xiao Wanru glanced at Xiao Yinru coldly. Xiao Yinru, who looked aggrieved and sad, was still wiping her tears. At this time, Xiao Yinru still thought that she could step on her. "Your Highness, I didn't take the medicine." Although there was no imperial physician, there was a young eunuch. "He took it for me," Xiao Wanru said slowly. She had prepared these words, so she answered without hesitation. The young eunuchs in the Imperial Institute of Medicine are basically illiterate. How could they help you get the medicine? The imperial physician asked in confusion. It was not a secret in the imperial palace. The empress stared at her face closely, trying to see a trace of anxiety and panic on her face. Xiao Wanru still looked very calm. After the imperial physician finished speaking, she said, "It's true that the little eunuch doesn't know how to read, but this pain-relieving medicine is a common medicine. Many imperial physicians will use it. The little eunuch took me there to have a look, and I recognized the words. That's it. I didn't touch the medicine that I asked the little eunuch to get." Even if you know the medicine, it's impossible for you to know that it is used to relieve pain. The medicine on the medicine cabinet is written with the names of the medicines. The imperial physician said in surprise. Ordinary misses from aristocratic families didn't know what the names of these medicines meant. Of course, they didn't dare to ask the young eunuch to get the medicine for them. "Are you sure you didn't get the wrong medicine, fifth miss?" The imperial physician felt that he knew some truth. The young eunuch was illiterate, so he only took the fifth Miss Xiao to the medicine cabinet. The fifth Miss Xiao didn't know the medicine, so she mistook it for the medicine. Then she took the dregs of the medicine and decocted them into the first Miss Xiao's medicine. After that, something seemed to have happened, so that the empress was alarmed. "Your Highness, I didn't get the wrong medicine. I know a little about medical knowledge and have treated my grandmother." Xiao Wanru shook her head and denied the wrong answer given by the imperial physician. Even if she didn't expose the fact that she knew medical skills, Xiao Yinru would expose it today. If she didn't know medical skills, she wouldn't be able to get the dregs of the medicine. Xiao Yinru lowered her head and listened to Xiao Wanru's words quietly. Sensing Xiao Wanru's calm and orderly narration, she felt inexplicably uneasy. Xiao Wanru's reaction shouldn't be like this. How could she not panic at all? How could she still be so calm when such a big thing had happened and the emperor was involved? Wrong, there must be something wrong. What on earth was wrong? She was flustered and couldn't help but tense up. "You know medical knowledge, so you must know the medicine. Do you know what the smell is in this room?" The empress said with a gloomy face, and her meaning couldn't be seen clearly. Xiao Wanru raised her nose and sniffed, shook her head, and said, "There is the smell of traditional Chinese medicine, which is the same as what Big Sister used to use. When I went out just now, the medicine had not been served." "Your Highness, could it be that there is something wrong with the medicine?" The young eunuch took the medicine and left in a hurry after taking it. Your Highness, if you don't believe me, you can check it, Xiao Wanru said. Even though she knew some medical knowledge, she didn't know it very well. After all, she hadn't learned it for a long time. Moreover, when she left, the bowl of medicine had not been served. Even if there was something wrong, she didn't know. Hearing her words, the Empress frowned tightly. Since Xiao Wanru dared to say so, it must be true. Even if there was no imperial physician, she didn't take the medicine herself, so it was impossible for her to get other medicinal materials. This kind of aphrodisiac medicine was not taken by her. But if it was not taken by her, who did it? The Empress didn't believe that this kind of aphrodisiac medicine was prescribed by the imperial physician. The imperial physician suddenly asked the palace maid kneeling on the ground, "Are the papers wrapped with the medicines still here?" "Yes, they are. They should still be here. They were still here when I came here just now." The palace maid nodded repeatedly and almost cried with joy. She didn't know how to cleanse herself. It would be great if there were medicine packets. A eunuch went out and soon came back with a pile of wrapped papers and put them on the table. The imperial physician came over and sniffed them one by one. After a while, he picked up a small wrapped paper. "Your Highness, this is the wrapped paper wrapped with that kind of medicine." It was inconvenient for him to say it directly, so he could only say it implicitly. "Is it this kind of medicine?" the Empress asked. "Yes, it's that kind of medicine." The imperial physician nodded. Xiao Wanru stood beside him and looked at the wrapped paper. There were creases on the wrapped paper, which could be seen to be a small medicine packet. "Your Highness, I've never seen such a small paper packet. If I had seen such a small paper packet just now, I would have noticed that it's different. The medicine of the first Miss Xiao is not like this." After saying this, Xiao Yanru was on the verge of collapse. She covered her chest and looked at Xiao Wanru with tears all over her face and astonishment. The expressions in her eyes were full of disbelief, anger, and grievance. She had mixed feelings and silently blamed Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru's eyes also met Xiao Yanru's, which were cold without a trace of warmth or timidity. After a long while, she said to the Empress, "Your Highness, where do you think this medicine came from? If it wasn't there before, it must have been put in by someone else." The Empress's sharp eyes fell on Xiao Yanru's face. She still thought that Xiao Yanru was very likely to do it. No matter how she looked at it, Xiao Yanru benefited from it. It was obvious that she had schemed against the emperor, but now she turned out to be innocent. If it were in the past, she might think that Xiao Yanru was a good person and should have been schemed against. But now she hated Xiao Yanru in every way, so how could she believe that she was innocent? Xiao Wanru had a bad relationship with the whole Duke Xing's mansion, and her relationship with Xiao Yanru was also very ordinary. How could she help Xiao Yanru do such a thing? The chief steward of Fengyi Palace glanced at the Empress, pondered for a moment, and asked the palace maid, "Have you ever left after decocting the medicine?" "I haven't left. I've been here all the time." Later, when First Miss asked for water, I left a little bit, but she also asked Shuqi to help me look after it. For the rest of the time, I've been here. Later, Fifth Miss came in and sat for a while, and then left, the palace maid said timidly. In this sentence, Xiao Wanru was suspicious, so was Xiao Yanru's maid. Xiao Wanru understood and a trace of sarcasm flashed in her eyes. She could really explain it clearly. "Your Highness, when I entered, I just went inside to sit for a while and see how the medicine was being decocted. After that, I stayed far away from the medicine pot and didn't walk over. It was impossible for me to spill anything in front of the palace maid." Chapter 792. Xiao Wanru was not afraid of being questioned, because she did not touch any medicine. "Tell me, what happened after the fifth miss came in?" the chief executive said with his face darkening. The palace maid hurriedly stammered, "Yes. The fifth miss didn't touch my medicine pot. She just looked at it, sat at the table for a while, and then left. She didn't touch my medicine pot, and it didn't leave." "First Miss Xiao, why didn't you ask your maid to ask for water from the palace maid herself instead of asking your maid to ask for it herself?" The chief executive turned to Xiao Yenru and looked at her coldly. He asked on behalf of the empress. Oh no. I don't know about it. Xiao Yenru covered her face and cried again. Bring the maid in. The chief executive said sternly. Shuchi was brought in. She had been kneeling outside, shivering with cold and fear. After coming in, her legs gave way and she knelt on the ground with a pale face. Tell me, why didn't you get water by yourself, but asked the palace maid to do it? The chief executive looked at Shuchi, who was so scared that she almost lost her life, and asked. Xiao Wanru lowered her head and looked at Shuchi's expression. Shuchi's eyes were filled with extreme panic and almost numbness. Hearing the chief executive's question, she said in a panic, I just arrived in the palace, so I don't know something. I need to get a pot of hot water. It was this palace maid who carried it before, but not this time. Did you carry the hot water in the past? The chief executive asked the palace maid again. I did in the past, but today, when I was decocting the medicine, she asked me to carry it. The palace maid said tremblingly. Xiao Yenru and her maid lived in the empress's Fengyi palace. Although it was a remote side hall, it was still the Fengyi palace. The master and the maid were very sensible. When it was inconvenient for them to do something, they would ask the people in the palace to do it, so as to avoid some unnecessary trouble. With a sullen face, the empress turned her eyes from Xiao Wanru's face to Xiao Yenru's. She increasingly felt that Xiao Yenru was foxy. Why didn't she realize that the first Miss Xiao was a foxy woman before? She even said that Xiao Yenru was dignified and decent. If she was really dignified and decent, how could she dress like this? With such an injury, why didn't he wear more clothes to keep him warm? His clothes should also be comfortable. Now that his waist was so thin and his figure was so good, it didn't seem like he was recuperating. Her lips curled into a sneer. It was not that difficult to enter the palace. She would let her in, but her position in the palace could not be guaranteed. Those who entered the Imperial palace might not necessarily be the favorite concubine. There was no lack of beautiful women in the Imperial palace. Even though Xiao Yenru was beautiful, she would not be able to win the emperor's heart, not to mention that she had an ambiguous reputation. Your Highness, I have something to report. The room was very quiet. The imperial physician suddenly spoke. He had been paying attention to the matter of the paper wrapping. Say it. The empress said. She would not leave if she didn't find out what happened today. The emperor just asked her to find out the truth. It was obvious that he was suspicious. Originally, she was wondering why the emperor suddenly got involved with Xiao Yenru. Now she knew that there was an aphrodisiac powder in the room, so there was nothing she couldn't figure out. After the imperial physician came, the curtain at the door was raised high, and a lot of it had been dispersed. But even so, the empress still felt very annoyed. It must be because she had used a lot of that medicine. Your Highness, the paper wrapping doesn't seem to be newly wrapped. It seems to have been wrapped a long time ago. The creases in it are very deep. I remember that the medicine was brought here yesterday. It can't have such deep creases. It seems that it has been wrapped for a long time. When the imperial physician discovered such a suspicious point, he immediately felt his mood lighten up. In fact, it was so easy for him to find it because he saw Xiao Wanru staring at the paper wrapping the medicine in his hand and muttering to herself, "The creases." Her words were very low and light, but the imperial physician had been paying attention to Xiao Wanru and was standing beside her. Hearing her muttering to herself, he immediately understood what she meant. As an imperial physician, he had been dealing with medicine all the time. Even if he was not familiar with the creases, he could guess one or two things. The medicine was obviously not taken today and should have been prepared a long time ago. Xiao Yenru became frantic and almost lowered her head in a panic, for fear that others would find the fear in her eyes. She was really scared. She felt a burning pain in her chest, making it hard for her to breathe. Originally, her injuries were not completely healed, but this time, she forced herself to stand up. Right now, she only felt her hands and feet were ice cold, and she was in despair. She couldn't have been discovered, right? Take this servant girl away and interrogate her. The empress had made a cold decision. The only one who could have put the medicine in the medicine was the servant girl named Shuchi, who worked for Xiao Yenru. Your Highness, it's impossible for Shuchi to hurt me. Your Highness. Xiao Yenru had to cry and beg for mercy, but the Empress ignored her. 2 eunuchs came over, one on each side, and were about to take Shuchi away for interrogation. First miss, I really didn't hurt you. I'm wronged. Shuchi was pulled up and suddenly cried loudly at Xiao Yenru. Oh no! Stop her! The Empress said sharply. But it was too late. Shuchi suddenly shook off the hands of the 2 eunuchs and slammed into the pillar on one side. Immediately, thousands of peach blossoms bloomed and blood splashed all over the ground. Xiao Yenru only had time to cry out, Shuchi! Her body went limp and she fainted to the ground. There was a strange silence in the side hall. The only clue, Shuchi, was dead. The Empress frowned tightly. The matter had come to an end here. She couldn't find any clue. The only thing she could be sure of was that there must be a conspiracy behind it. The servant girl named Shuchi was the most suspicious one. However, the clue stopped here. The Empress was aggrieved and angry. Looking at Xiao Yenru, who had fainted there, she couldn't vent her anger, so she could only gnash her teeth secretly. Have someone clean it up. The Empress stood up. It was impossible to find anything here. The dead Shuchi was taken away, and Xiao Yenru was helped to the bed. Xiao Wanru respectfully watched the Empress leave, and then her eyes fell on Xiao Yenru, who was lying on the bed. Xiao Yenru looked very miserable. Her face was red and swollen, and no one cleaned up the blood at the corner of her mouth. Her clothes had long been in a mess. The scarf wrapped around her chest had been torn apart at this moment, and there was a faint trace of blood. Obviously, the wound had been pulled. Her originally beautiful face was no longer so charming. The Empress was quite heavy-handed. However, anyone would not be able to endure it. Seducing her man under her eyes, as long as it was a woman, she would not be able to resist. The Empress was also a woman. The Empress hated Xiao Yenru very much. Otherwise, with the Empress's behavior in the past, she would never hit Xiao Yenru. Even if she hit Xiao Yenru, she wouldn't hit Xiao Yenru's face so obviously, which could be seen at a glance. In the last life, Xiao Yenru had been favored and had a good relationship with the Empress. No one knew whether it was because of the Empress's high self-restraint or Xiao Yenru's excellent means. But in the last life, Xiao Yenru had entered the palace as a concubine, and there was no conflict of interest between her and the Empress. The two of them were very harmonious. Now it was different. Xiao Yenru entered the palace under the Empress's face, so even if she entered the palace, her relationship with the Empress would not be good. The Empress would no longer stand behind Duke Xing's mansion and support all the actions of Duke Xing's mansion. Xiao Wanru raised the corners of her mouth silently with a bit of sarcasm and coldness. So this life was different from the last life. Even if Xiao Yenru entered the palace again, it was impossible for her to get the position of a high-ranking concubine in the current situation, and the Empress would not allow it. Although she didn't know what had happened in the hall just now, the injury on Xiao Yenru's face was probably done by the Empress. Since the Empress, who had always been dignified, took action, she would definitely not let Xiao Yenru have a good time. The Emperor was probably very tired of fighting for a woman with his son. Otherwise, he would not have left just now, knowing that Xiao Yenru would not have a good life after he left. Fifth miss? A timid voice came from the door. Xiao Wanru looked up and found that it was Han Dan. She didn't know where she had hidden just now. At this time, when the Empress left, she stood out again. Come in and help my big sister freshen up, Xiao Wanru said. Yes, I'll come in right away. Han Dan staggered in with weak legs. She was really scared. She had knelt in a corridor secretly. When she saw the Emperor and the Empress, she felt something was wrong and didn't dare to come over. She only saw the Empress leave. Of course, she also saw Shuchi being carried out with blood all over her head. She didn't look angry anymore. How could she not be afraid? She had served the first Miss Xiao with Shuchi before. As soon as she turned around, Shuchi was in such a state, and she didn't know whether she was alive or not. She looked up at the first Miss Xiao, who was also in a mess on the bed. If it weren't for the fifth Mrs. explanation, she really couldn't believe that the person lying on the bed with a bigger face was the beautiful first Miss Xiao. This was unbelievable. Fifth Miss, how is Shuchi? Han Dan asked with difficulty, trembling all over. The only person in this room who could comfort her was the fifth Miss Xiao, who was still so indifferent and elegant, as if what had happened between the Empress and the Emperor just now had no effect on her at all. Compared with the first Miss Xiao, the fifth Miss Xiao was the backbone. If someone found out that she was involved in something, Shuchi didn't dare to say anything and directly killed herself. Xiao Wenru glanced at Han Dan lightly and said, "There is no one else around my big sister. You will serve her from now on. The first Miss will leave the Imperial Palace. I'm a servant of the Imperial Palace." Han Dan felt that she didn't want to serve the first Miss Xiao at all. She couldn't even protect the people around her, which showed the first Miss Xiao's ability. "My big sister will enter the Imperial Palace. There is no one around her to serve her, so you can serve her." Xiao Wenru calmly stated the fact. Chapter 793. Han Dan almost screamed subconsciously. After taking 2 steps back, she suddenly came to her senses and knelt down in front of Xiao Wenru. "Fifth Miss, please save me. I don't want to. Xiao Wenru raised her eyes and looked at Han Dan's face coldly. "Big sister will enter the Imperial Palace. If you stay by her side, you will get rid of your previous identity. If big sister is favored in the future, you will be her personal palace maid. Isn't it just right?" In the last life, the two of them were also a master and a servant who colluded with each other. Fifth Miss? Han Dan cried. She really just wanted to find a good master and didn't want anything else. She didn't want to be with a useless. It would be better to stay in Chushio Palace. At least she would have a chance after 3 years. In the Imperial Palace, the most unpleasant thing was that their masters were ignored or directly sent to the Cold Palace. Although the palace maids didn't dare to talk about their masters who were in the limelight, they dared to talk about the S in the Cold Palace and talk about their domineering days. They had heard a lot about it and at least knew something about it. Xiao Yinru's situation was not very good. Although the first Miss Xiao was extraordinarily beautiful and intelligent, she couldn't get the Emperor's approval or the Empress's protection. Her future was really bleak. Han Dan, there is no lack of smart people in the Imperial Palace. You served Big Sister before, but now there is no one serving her. If you don't stay, you have to find someone else to help you. If Big Sister knows that you are unwilling to serve her, she may directly kill you. Xiao Wenru paused and said coldly. Han Dan was smart and looked at Xiao Yinru on the bed in horror. Although Xiao Yinru was lying there quietly as if she was harmless, embarrassed, and incompetent, it didn't prevent Han Dan from thinking of the first Miss Xiao's previous schemes. At first glance, she could tell that Xiao Yinru was a scheming woman. Don't worry about Big Sister's future. Now I can rest assured if you stay by her side. In the future, there will be a way to save you. Xiao Wenru looked at Han Dan and said. Xiao Yinru's words were very vague, but Han Qian understood it. Her eyes immediately lit up. She kowtowed to Xiao Wenru 3 times and choked with sobs. Fifth Miss, I understand. I will definitely serve First Miss well according to Fifth Miss's words. The reason why she served Xiao Yinru was because of Xiao Wenru's words. It could be seen that this maid really understood Xiao Wenru's meaning. Xiao Yinru's current situation was not very good. The imperial physician came to see her again. After that, she had been in a state of intermittent half-awake. From time to time, she struggled and cried, "Spare me, spare me." Xiao Yinru. Xiao Dan. Xiao Dan. Dan down. Xiao. Is there any aphrodisiac powder in that medicine? The emperor asked the empress in a deep voice. All the others in the imperial study were driven out, and even the chief supervisor of the empress waited outside the door, leaving only Durong to serve the most distinguished couple in the imperial study. I found out that the medicine was put in by First Miss Xiao's maid named Shuchi. But when the maid was dragged away for interrogation, she hit her head and died. First Miss Xiao also fainted and hasn't woken up yet. I asked the imperial physician to wait on first Miss Xiao over there. The empress said slowly and didn't mention that she couldn't control herself and slapped Xiao Yinru twice at that time. She was the empress at this time, the mother of the country, so she had to be magnanimous. The medicine was put in the eldest daughter of Duke Xing? The emperor had an intuition that there was something wrong. He was also affected by it. It seems to be the case. But I asked the imperial physician. He said that when the medicine is put in hot water, it will also emit an aura. The aura will also have an aphrodisiac effect on people. The empress paused for a moment and said, "Early this morning, first Miss Xiao asked fifth Miss Xiao to go to the Imperial Institute of Medicine to get painkillers. She said that she didn't sleep well last night. When fifth Miss Xiao went there, it happened to be the time when the Imperial Institute of Medicine was on duty. Recently, because there were also imperial physicians on duty in Chuxiu Palace, the headquarters of the Imperial Institute of Medicine would be vacant when the imperial physicians were on duty. Fifth Miss Xiao happened to go there at this time. Later, first Miss Xiao said that fifth Miss Xiao might also get some aphrodisiac powder to hurt her. The relationship between them has never been very good, and fifth Miss Xiao knows some medical skills. The empress's words were true, and that was what she meant. But when put together, it seemed that Xiao Yinru wanted to make Xiao Wanru a scapegoat. Moreover, there was another hidden meaning in her words, which the emperor also understood. The emperor's face suddenly became sharp. If it was really Xiao Yinru who wanted to hurt Xiao Wanru and even schemed against the Imperial Institute of Medicine and even the rotation of the Imperial Institute of Medicine, there must be someone secretly helping her, and this person was from the Imperial Palace. The rotation of the imperial physicians in Chuxiu Palace had only been established recently. Who could have schemed it so clearly? Such a person would definitely be a hidden danger in the Imperial Palace. Who has Xiao Jing's eldest daughter contacted? The emperor asked coldly. Seeing the emperor's cold eyes, the empress breathed a sigh of relief and then frowned as well. I can't find out the truth even if I want to. First Miss Xiao usually behaves well and basically has nothing to do with her. Except for the thing between you and Zhou, she has been stable the rest of the time. Only her servant girl contacted a lot of people. I don't know who is suspicious. It's a pity that the servant girl is dead. Otherwise, we can get a lot of information. The empress seemed to follow the emperor's meaning and completely followed the emperor's meaning. But in fact, she made the emperor's words stretch a lot. She really hated Xiao Yinru and wished the emperor could order her to die now. But she also knew that it was impossible. Before there was any factual evidence, the identity of the eldest lineal daughter of Duke Xing's mansion could protect her life. But she would only protect her life. She would not let Xiao Yinru be favored. Try to find out every person who contacted her servant girl, the emperor said. Yes, I will secretly investigate this matter, but your majesty now. How will she be settled? Since such a thing happened, we have to give Duke Xing's mansion an explanation. Otherwise, it will not be good if it is spread out. Moreover, it is related to Prince Xian. Sister concubine Ming also wants your majesty to make a decision as soon as possible. The empress was indeed a good empress. At this time, she was still thinking about the emperor wholeheartedly. The message revealed in these words was to ask the emperor to bring Xiao Yinru into the imperial palace. But she also mentioned Chu Liuxin and concubine Ming, which made the emperor speechless. Originally, it was his youngest son who wanted to plot against him, but by accident, it became him. No one could be free from grudges. In particular, it seemed that concubine Ming also knew it, which made the emperor more and more tired. Bring her into the imperial palace. The emperor waved his hand impatiently and said, he really didn't want to talk about Xiao Yinru. This woman was not only not a good person, but also a lascivious person. He would find a chance to deal with her in the future. Now it seemed that he couldn't get any evidence against her, so he could only let her stay in the imperial palace for the time being. Yes, I also think so. I just want to give her a position. Originally, as the eldest lineal daughter of Duke Xing's mansion, she could be directly conferred the title of concubine Ming, but concubine Ming, the empress said, looking difficult to solve. When mentioning concubine Ming, she mentioned Chu Liuxin, which also reminded the emperor of what had happened before. She did not mention concubine Da. When concubine Da was mentioned, the emperor would think of the scandal of Chu Luiwei and his son. Speaking of it, it was for Xiao Yanru, but this kind of thing hurt the enemy 1,000 times and oneself 800 times. The empress did not want the emperor to think of his son. When the emperor thought of his son, he was also very tired. A treasure forest of the 9th grade. The more the emperor listened, the more annoyed he became, and the more he remembered that he had also been schemed against. Among the emperor's women, Baolin was of the lowest rank. The empress finally felt relieved. She smiled like a virtuous lady and advised, "Your Majesty, it's not good, is it? After all, she is the eldest daughter of lineal descent of Duke Xing's mansion. She can't enter the palace with such a low rank. What else can I do? She plotted against me. Do I have to invite her into the Imperial Palace to be a high-ranking?" Speaking of this, the emperor waved his hand and said, "You can leave. I will make it clear to Xiao Jing. For the sake of the reputation of Duke Xing's mansion for many years, his daughter has not been convicted." Seeing that the emperor was already annoyed and angry, the empress was overjoyed, but she still looked very calm and gentle. "Yes, I will listen to your Majesty's arrangement, but where will Xiao Baolin live now?" "Any place. Just let her stay there. Don't wander around if there is nothing important, and she doesn't need to greet you and mother," the emperor said impatiently. The empress didn't dare to say anything more this time. Since her goal had been achieved, there was no reason for her to stay. She obediently bowed to the emperor and then slowly stepped out. When she reached the door of the imperial study, she looked up at the sky with a cold smile on her lips. Then she slowly straightened her sleeves and returned to the Fengyi Palace with a group of palace maids. The emperor's intention was very obvious. Xiao Yanru could enter the imperial palace, but she could be casually thrown into the imperial palace to be kept, and she would be kept under house arrest. Although it was not the cold palace, it was almost the same as the cold palace. It was just a treasure forest of the 9th grade. The emperor couldn't put her in the cold palace. After all, she was fine on the surface, so she could be placed near the cold palace. There were several large palaces there, which were far from the main palace. No one was willing to go there, because they all felt it was remote and unlucky. So she could go there, so as not to be an eyesore. After the empress returned to the Fengyi Palace with satisfaction, it didn't take long for her to issue an edict and ask the supervisor eunuch to send Xiao Yanru to the side hall. Her side hall was not willing to be kept by such a bitch. Xiao Yanru was carried out of the empress's Fengyi Palace. There were 2 edicts to enter the imperial palace, one to Duke Xing's mansion and the other to herself. Before she woke up, she had become Xiao Baolin. Chapter 794. No, spare me. I won't dare to do it again. I won't dare to do it again. A shrill scream came. Xiao Wanru looked at Xiao Yanru, who was sweating profusely. Xiao Yanru seemed to be frightened by something again and must be having a nightmare. She came to this cold palace with Xiao Yanru and would leave after a while. That was what the empress had said before. Xiao Yanru's identity was different from before, so she didn't have to stay here every day. It would be bad if she offended the emperor. Han Dan hurriedly stepped forward to help Xiao Yanru breathe and said in a low voice, Baolin, wake up, wake up." Xiao Yanru, who was sweating profusely, suddenly woke up. She stared straight at something in the air and froze there, giving a gloomy and weird feeling. "Baolin, what's wrong with you? Don't scare me." Han Dan hurriedly shook her gently and said. Xiao Yanru seemed to be a little sober. She slowly rolled her eyes and let out a heavy sigh of relief when she saw Han Dan, as if she should have seen Han Dan. She said in a slightly hoarse voice, "A glass of water for me, I'll do it right away." Han Dan skillfully let Xiao Yanru lean on her, turned to the table, poured half a glass of warm water for her, and brought it to her lips. Xiao Yanru drank it up eagerly. Because she drank it in a hurry, some water spilled on her. After drinking it up, she said, "More." Han Dan poured another glass of water. Xiao Yanru took it and drank it up this time. After drinking 2 glasses of warm water, she felt alive. She looked up at the surroundings and asked in a low voice, Han Dan, where is this? Isn't this where I live? Bao Lin, this is where you live. The Empress ordered you to live here and said that it would be the place where you and I live in the future. Some places are not very good. I'll clean them up later and they will look much better. Han Dan said with a bitter face. She didn't expect to follow Xiao Yanru to such a remote palace. Was there such a palace in the palace? She didn't know it before. Not only was it remote, but it also looked old. Some places were even a little rundown. Was this place really for the concubines to live in? Is this place really not the legendary Cold Palace? She just wanted to find a good master and take advantage of the situation to ascend to the 9 heavens in the future. She really didn't expect that her current life was even worse than before. But what could she do? She could only endure like this. Empress, this is where I live. Xiao Yanru muttered to herself, reached out to press her head, and felt that something seemed to be different. She shouldn't belong to Bao Lin. How could she be in such a low position? Xiao Yanru had been dreaming just now. She couldn't remember everything clearly in the dream, but she still vaguely remembered something. She was the Emperor's Jiaoyi, so how could she be in Baolin Forest? How could she be in such a low-level Baolin Forest and live in such a remote and dilapidated place? She was the eldest lineal daughter of Duke Xing's mansion. When she was about to sit up straight with her hands on the bed, she suddenly met a pair of deep eyes. The cold and sharp eyes, which seemed to condense the ground, made her hands go limp and her body fall heavily again. After being stunned for a moment, she turned her head in a hurry and saw Xiao Wanru sitting in front of the table. She was so shocked that she covered her chest with her hands, widened her eyes in disbelief, and said in horror, How could you still be alive? How could you still be alive? Big sister, what do you mean? Why can't I be alive? Seeing that Xiao Yanru finally saw her, Xiao Wanru slightly raised the corners of her mouth and asked with a trace of cold sarcasm. Are you a human or a ghost? Xiao Yanru looked as if she had really seen a ghost. She shrank her body desperately and her eyes were full of panic and fear. Big sister, do you want to touch me and see if I am a human or a ghost? Xiao Wanru smiled, stood up, and walked slowly to Xiao Yanru. Her bright watery eyes were deep and bottomless, as if there was something dragging Xiao Yanru to sink into it. Don't come over, don't come over. Xiao Yanru screamed in horror, it has nothing to do with me. I didn't kill you. Don't come to me. It's Prince Yu's order. It's not me. It's not me. Xiao Wanru stood still and looked at Xiao Yanru with a trace of suspicion in her eyes. It didn't sound like what Xiao Yanru said. Qin Wanru, you have nothing to do with me, and it has nothing to do with our Duke Xing's mansion. Don't come over, all the members of your first branch have died. Xiao Yanru's eyes drifted, and she lost control of her expression and screamed shrilly. Qin Wanru, Prince, you killed me? Xiao Wanru's eyes became colder and colder. It didn't happen in this life, but in her last life. So what Xiao Yanru sensed now was that she and Chu Liwei conspired to murder her in her last life? First, Miss Xiao, I heard that people who are cut in half at the waist die a violent death. If they are really wronged, they often haunt you, and will haunt you for a lifetime. Xiao Wanru sneered, slowly lowered her head, and whispered gloomily in Xiao Yanru's ear, which shrank more and more. Xiao Yanru burst into tears and threw the cushion in her hand at Xiao Wanru. It's not me. It's really not me. Who asked you to get in our way? It's good for everyone if you die. Anyway, you can't recover in that state. You'd better die. Her words were incoherent, but Xiao Wanru understood some other meaning and couldn't help sneering. Because she had lived a miserable life, Xiao Yanru simply wanted to deprive her of her life. Xiao Yanru really carried out the robber theory very thoroughly. There was no more disgusting theory than this. She threw the cushion to Xiao Yanru, and her eyes were as cold as a sharp dagger. Xiao Yanru, who was lying on the bed, suddenly seemed to wake up at this time. She reached out to press her head, looked at Xiao Wanru, looked around, and then fixed her eyes on Xiao Yanru's pale face. The horror caused by the dream just now in her mind was slowly fading away. Slowly, she began to remember everything that had happened. She really fainted. She had told Shuchi about it at the beginning and threatened Shuchi with Shuchi's family. If something happened out of control, Shuchi would commit suicide to atone for her crime in order to clear her name. However, she didn't expect that things would really go bad. Feeling weak, flustered and scared, she fainted. After waking up, she only felt that she had a nightmare. In the dream, she was Jiaoyi, and she set up Xiao Wanru to kill Qin Wanru, who was still Qin Wanru. She couldn't remember anything else. However, after all, a dream was a dream, and everything in front of her was real. Qin Wanru had already changed her name to Xiao Wanru. If possible, she really didn't want Xiao Wanru to return to her family. Fifth sister, did I have a nightmare just now? Xiao Yanru took a long breath, held the quilt and asked. Seeing that Xiao Yanru's eyes became clear, Xiao Wanru knew that she really understood at this time. She straightened up, looked at her, and said, Congratulations, big sister, on getting what you wanted and entering the Imperial Palace. From now on you are Xiao Baolin. I have something to do, so I can't accompany you. I have to go back to Chushio Palace first. What did you say? I'm just a Baolin? Xiao Yanru asked in disbelief. She should have been Jiaoyi in the dream just now. Why was she such a low-level Baolin? Baolin, you are indeed Baolin. Han Dan beside her answered in a murmur. Why is it like this? Why is it like this? It shouldn't be like this. I am the eldest daughter of lineal descent of Duke Xing's mansion. Xiao Yanru said in a panic and reached out to hold Han Dan's hand, as if she wanted to know the answer from her. After the emperor's death, she had guessed that she would enter the Imperial Palace. Although it was different from her previous idea, she could accept it if she gritted her teeth. However, why was she in such a low position? Baolin, this is the Empress's order. You have now moved out of the side hall of Fengyi Palace. Han Dan replied carefully. If it was possible, she also didn't want to come here, but she had to come here. Not only her, but also the palace maid who had decocted medicine for Xiao Yanru and the palace maid who had swept the side hall before came here. The Empress's actions seemed to be very generous. However, none of the palace maids who came here didn't resent Xiao Yanru. Who would be willing to come here, which was like a cold palace? I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I'll go to the Empress. No, I'll go to the Emperor. Xiao Yanru suddenly stood up. Big sister, I advise you not to worry. Maybe second uncle has been implicated. Big sister, you did a good job asking me to go to the Imperial Institute of Medicine early in the morning. However, there are many smart people in the world. Don't you understand what I mean? Xiao Wanru stood aside and looked at Xiao Yanru coldly and said, What do you mean? Xiao Yanru said in a trembling voice and glared at Xiao Wanru fiercely, as if it was Xiao Wanru who made her fall into such a situation. I don't mean anything. I just want you to recognize your current situation. You are now a junior 9th grade Baolin, who is not favored by the Emperor and has offended the Empress. I don't know how long you can stay in the Imperial Palace. I'm afraid that old madam will not give you any support in the future. How useful can a useless chess piece be? Xiao Wanru mercilessly attacked Xiao Yanru's confidence and then turned around. Xiao Wanru, is it you? Is it you? Xiao Yanru suddenly pounced on Xiao Wanru and seemed to want to pull Xiao Wanru's clothes. Xiao Wanru moved aside and happened to avoid Xiao Yanru's hand. Xiao Yanru fell heavily in front of the bed, which shook her wound. She couldn't help covering her chest and groaning. Xiao Yanru, you want to harm others. You are very clever, but some people can't be convicted without evidence. Being in the Imperial Palace, I will enjoy my life in the Imperial Palace in the future. There is no one to support you, no love, only disgust. Or when I meet you next time, you will only be a skeleton. Xiao Wanru looked down at Xiao Yanru, who was in a mess, and attacked her confidence with words. Then, without giving Xiao Yanru a chance to argue, she only glanced at Han Dan, who was standing aside, turned around and strode away with Yu Jia. No one saw the gloomy look in Xiao Wanru's eyes. As long as Duke Xing was still her second uncle, Xiao Yanru would not stop. She was patient until the time came to reveal her true intentions. Chapter 795. The sedan chair stopped outside the door. Xiao Wenru got on it, guarded by Yu Jie, and went to Chuxiu Palace. It was a long way and many things had happened today. Sitting in the sedan chair, she slowly closed her eyes and thought about Xiao Yinru's loss of control just now. Did Xiao Yinru remember what happened in the previous life just now? What she said at that moment was still vivid in her ears, but her behavior after thinking about it was not like that. It was more like that she had just woken up from a nightmare and could not come back to her senses for a while. Then she thought about how she looked when she fainted. She should have had a nightmare and dreamed about something in the previous life. But what she didn't understand was that Xiao Yinru was still fine when she died in the previous life. Why did it sound like someone wanted to kill her and she kept begging for mercy? It was different from what she remembered. She reached out and rubbed between her eyebrows, feeling that she had forgotten something important again. After thinking about it carefully, she thought that what she had forgotten was all related to Chu Luchen. Could it be that Chu Luchen knew that Xiao Yinru had hurt her and wanted to kill Xiao Yinru to avenge her? This thought was very strange and a little impossible. After all, Xiao Yinru was the emperor's Jiaoyi at that time. A third-class Jiaoyi was a high-ranking. Nobody could kill her at will, even if Chu Luchen was the crown prince. At that time, he couldn't kill Xiao Yinru directly. But somehow, she felt that it was very likely to be true. She reached out and rubbed between her eyebrows again, feeling sore and astringent. So many things happened today that she couldn't think for a while. The sedan chair suddenly stopped, and Xiao Wenru was stunned with her hand pressed between her eyebrows. Is it the fifth Miss Xiao of Duke Xing's mansion in front? A sharp voice came from the eunuch. It's our Mississippi greetings, Prince Yu. Yu Jie saw Chu Luiwei at the intersection in front of her and hurriedly stepped forward to salute. Hearing that it was Chu Luiwei outside, Xiao Wenru had to sigh softly. Xiao Yinru and Chu Luiwei were good partners. Even if they couldn't be together obviously, they would be together in the end. She didn't believe that Chu Luiwei was really passing by. On the way to Chuxiu Palace, they didn't pass by a big palace road. How could it be so coincidental? Yu Jie knocked on the sedan chair door gently. Knowing that Xiao Wenru was about to come out, she hurriedly turned around to lift the curtain of the sedan chair for her and then helped her get out of the sedan chair. When she arrived in front of the sedan chair, Xiao Wenru gracefully bowed to Chu Luiwei and said, "Greetings, Prince Yu. Fifth Miss Xiao, where did you come from?" "That is not Chuxiu Palace," Chu Luiwei said and looked behind her. It was indeed not Chuxiu Palace. "I'm on my way back to Chuxiu Palace." Xiao Wenru didn't believe that Chu Luiwei knew nothing about it. She lowered her head and said respectfully, waiting for Chu Luiwei's intention, "Where does your sister live now?" Chu Luiwei asked. Xiao Wenru lowered her head respectfully again and said, "Yes." "Why did such a thing suddenly happen to your sister? Did someone hurt her?" Chu Luiwei looked at her and asked. Xiao Wenru shook her head and said, "I don't know what happened. It's all up to the Empress." With the first Miss Xiao's character, it's impossible for her to do such a thing. "Fifth Miss, don't you think there's something wrong with it?" Chu Luiwei said. Xiao Wenru looked up at him with her distant eyes, as if she was looking at him or another person through him. Although the smile on her lips was gentle, it inexplicably made people feel sarcastic. She said, "Prince Yu, do you mean that I should go to the Empress to intercede and ask her to check whether Big Sister was framed?" Chu Luiwei frowned and looked at her unhappily. He was speechless for a long time. Usually, he couldn't tell that she was sharp-tongued. Fifth Miss and First Miss Xiao are sisters of the same mansion. Shouldn't they love each other? After a while, Chu Luiwei asked unhappily, "Love each other? Is what Prince Yu said true? Today, I almost took the blame for Big Sister again. If the so-called love each other is like this, I'd better not." Xiao Wenru said. The meaning of contradiction in her words was very obvious, and she did not hesitate to lift the veil of tenderness between her and Xiao Yinru. After being stunned for a moment, Chu Luiwei immediately became angry. Originally, he wanted to talk nicely. Since it was so, he could be tougher. When he was about to speak, he suddenly heard a gentle voice behind him. "Big brother, what are you doing here? Are you also going to visit the new Xiao Baolin?" The voice was gentle with a little laziness. It was Chu Liuchen's voice. Chu Luiwei looked back and saw Chu Liuchen getting out of his special wheelchair and looking at them. His handsome eyes were raised. Although he was gentle, he inexplicably made people feel a kind of chill. Others might not know this kind of chill, but Chu Luiwei knew it. On the surface, the two of them seemed to be very friendly, but in fact, there were many times when they disliked each other in private. Chu Liuchen used to hurt his heart as much as he could, and he was completely unscrupulous. Anyway, there was no tomorrow for him, so he did not care who he offended. At least when the Empress Dowager and the Emperor were here, even if those people disliked him, they would not do anything to him. Now he had been a little restrained for a period of time. But even so, Chu Luiwei did not dare to be willful and talk nonsense in front of Chu Liuchen. Chu Liuchen was not a reasonable person. Who knew what he would do next and what he would do? There was one thing that Chu Luiwei was very clear about. No matter what happened in the end, his father and grandmother would be partial to him and ask him to give in to Chu Luiwei. His poor health became his capital to be presumptuous. A trace of malice flashed in his eyes. He wanted to see how long this invalid would run wild. The invalid who had no chance to be the emperor repeatedly courted death, just pushed himself to the road of death faster. Third brother. Chu Luiwei's face quickly returned to its usual look, and he said lightly. He looked at Chu Liuchen and said, "Third brother, where are you going?" "I'm going to Xiao Baolin's residence. Uncle asked me to see how Xiao Baolin's residence is. If it's okay, forget it," Chu Liuchen said casually, and then glanced at Xiao Wanru. Seeing that she was unscathed, he was relieved. Of course, if Chu Luiwei really hurt Xiao Wanru, he would not be polite. At present, it was a little unjustifiable. When he took Zhuozhua under his wing, he would naturally support Zhuozhua openly. Xiao Wanru bowed sideways. Chu Luiwei frowned and did not understand what she meant. This kind of thing could not be related to Chu Liuchen in any way. "Is there anything wrong with the place where he lives? Do you need to go there?" Chu Luiwei asked. "There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that my uncle is going to summon Duke Xing's Xiao Jing later. He has to tell him about his daughter in detail. It happens that I have nothing to do, so I volunteered to go there to relieve my uncle's worries," Chu Liuchen said in an increasingly lazy tone and looked up at Xiao Wanru. "I happen to meet 5th Miss Xiao, so I won't go there. I'll ask 5th Miss Xiao." Xiao Wanru looked at Chu Liuchen speechlessly. It was weird that the two princes were alarmed by such a trivial matter in the Baolin forest. In fact, it was a trivial matter. It was enough for a little eunuch to come here once. "Brother, what are you doing here at this time? Did you ask for something from uncle and help me run errands?" Chu Liuchen raised his handsome eyes and looked at Chu Luiwei a few times, and said with a little provocation, "I have nothing to do. I just want to take a walk. I heard that something happened in the palace, but I didn't expect to meet 5th Miss Xiao." Chu Luiwei said lightly with a gloomy look in his eyes. "Well, brother, do as you please. I have something to talk to 5th Miss Xiao." Chu Liuchen smiled naturally and said goodbye to Chu Luiwei, with an obvious intention to drive him away. Looking at Xiao Wanru, who bowed her head respectfully, and then looking at Chu Liuchen, Chu Luiwei felt very annoyed and his face became colder. He turned around and strode away. "5th Miss Xiao, tell me what happened today. Uncle is still waiting for me to go back and report. This matter is related to the Imperial harem, so I have to report it to Imperial grandmother." Chu Liuchen said with a serious face and reached out to lead her forward. "5th Miss, walk with me and tell me." After saying that, he walked forward casually. "Yes." Xiao Wanru nodded and followed him. The rest of the group followed behind them from a distance. "Prince, why are you here?" Seeing that the people behind her were far away, Xiao Wanru asked in a low voice. "I can't let Chu Luiwei bully my people." Chu Liuchen said casually with a flicker of his handsome eyes with a smile. "Xiao Yanru's matter has been settled, and you and me can also be settled." Xiao Wanru was stunned by his words and asked subconsciously, "So soon?" "Soon? Why don't I think so?" Chu Liuchen raised his eyebrows and said with a pair of bright eyes with a bit of leisure, "Imperial grandmother has been looking for an opportunity to issue an edict, but it is not convenient for her to issue an edict for the time being before the consort selection is over. Now it happens that after Xiao Yanru's matter is settled, she has to show her favor to Duke Xing's mansion. Xiao Wanru understood what he meant. Xiao Yanru's matter had become like this. Even if there was no evidence, Duke Xing's mansion would definitely be implicated. Xiao Yanru's position in the treasure forest showed the anger of the Empress in the Imperial Palace. No matter how capable Xiao Jing was, the anger of the Empress was enough to destroy his ability. If Xiao Yanru's matter was a blow to Duke Xing's mansion, then the matter between Xiao Yanru and Chu Luchen would be a sweet fruit. The emperor couldn't go too far if there was no substantial thing for his benefactor's family. Moreover, Xiao Yanru's matter involved the royal brothers, father and son, so he would definitely cover it up. When Xiao Yanru's matter was spread out, there would be no obvious mistakes. The only thing that would be criticized was that Xiao Yanru and the emperor had a little trouble in the empress's Fengyi palace. This was obviously a disgrace to the empress. As the emperor, he also needed to be fair at this time. A treasure forest was enough to explain the problem, and it could be regarded as an explanation to the empress. Prince, do you know that there will be a gap in the Imperial Institute of Medicine's turnover? Since this matter had come to this, Xiao Wanru put it aside for the time being. There was another thing that she wanted to inquire about, and she felt it was very important. Chapter 796. I don't know. I should know if I ask around. Chu Luchen narrowed his eyes, which were full of brilliance and color, which were really moving. Compared with Xiao Wanru's, his lips had always been light and too pale, like a beautiful young man in a quiet landscape. He was at a good age, but not too gorgeous. Although Xiao Wanru had known that he was extremely outstanding, she couldn't help but be stunned at this moment. Then she reacted, blushed, and hurriedly lowered her head. Chu Luchen raised the corner of his mouth in a very good mood and said, "Do you want to ask who can inquire about this matter so clearly, and it happened recently?" Xiao Wanru nodded, tried to calm down, and then said, "Not everyone in the Imperial Palace knows about it, right? Not many people know about it, but I can inquire about it," Chu Luchen said meaningfully. His words made Xiao Wanru fall silent, knowing that she could not find any clues from this direction. "If you must investigate it, in fact, you can do it." Chu Luchen suddenly smiled and reached out to pull Xiao Wanru's hand. Xiao Wanru was shocked. She hurriedly looked around and said in a low voice, "Someone will see it. What's there to be afraid of? Imperial grandmother has already written down the edict. You are already this king's princess. Is it possible that this king and the future princess can hold hands and say anything?" Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows maliciously and said, in fact, he could use another way to achieve his goal. Although it was a little bloody, the effect was very obvious. Methods could only be useful or not. To him, he had never been afraid of using methods that were more effective. But this time, Xiao Wanru not only blushed, but also blushed. She struggled uneasily and tried to break free from his hand. "Don't worry, no one will see it." Chu Luchen did not let go of her hand. Her hand fell down, and his wide sleeve happened to cover their hands that were holding each other's. Feeling the texture of the cloth in her hand, Xiao Wanru was relieved. She calmed down, shook her head, and refused Chu Luchen, saying, "You don't have to investigate it. I will find it out." "Really?" Chu Luchen asked lazily. "No, we can't rush this matter now. Besides, it's not good to investigate it too clearly," Xiao Wanru said decisively. If she wanted to investigate, she would do it quietly and slowly, and she would not use Chu Liuchen's power. Many people in the palace had intervened. She was afraid that any abnormal action of Chu Luchen would cause the whole situation to change. There was another point. Xiao Wanru didn't say it clearly, but she believed that Chu Luchen would understand. If the water was too clear, there would be no fish. This was just a beginning. If they found out everything at the beginning, it would be more difficult to find out if someone secretly took action. Xiao Wanru had something on her mind. What she wanted to investigate was actually about her parents. It was not easy to dig up the past of more than a decade ago. She had to be able to calm herself down and endure more. Only then would she be able to uncover all the things that happened in the past bit by bit. This matter couldn't be rushed. Now Xiao Yanru's matter had just started, so she naturally couldn't cut it off. She had to keep the clues and slowly pull out all the things. Xiao Wanru had a hunch that it had something to do with the past. You really don't want me to intervene? Chu Luchen, who had always been gentle, looked at Xiao Wanru with a hint of coldness in his eyes. He didn't intend to hide his joy and anger in front of her, nor did he need to pretend to be gentle. He had always lived in the dark and had never intended to let himself out of the darkness. Except for her, it seemed that she was different from the beginning. He felt inexplicably soft in his heart, and the slender little hand in his hand obediently let him hold it, which made him feel an indescribable sense of satisfaction. Only when he was with her did he feel that he was a living person who could have his own happiness, anger, sorrow, and joy, instead of being gentle and elegant according to different situations. He, Chu Luchen, had never been a gentle person. I really don't need it. After saying that, Xiao Wanru felt that her hand was held tightly by Chu Luchen, so she hurriedly said, at least not for the time being. I may have to trouble you later. As soon as she finished saying that, she felt that her hand was loosened and much gentler. If you need anything, come to me, Chu Luchen said in a faint voice. I know. Xiao Wanru nodded and tilted her head to look at him. Seeing that he pursed his lips tightly and looked quite unhappy, she couldn't help smiling sweetly. Your Highness, can we go back now? Maybe the Emperor is still waiting for you. She shook her hand gently to attract Chu Liuchen's attention. He won't wait for me, Chu Luchen said in a lazy voice. In fact, I'm just here for a walk. It's impossible for me to do that. It's not a good thing. So, the Emperor didn't ask you to come here? Xiao Wanru widened her watery eyes and looked at Chu Luchen in front of her speechlessly. This man was really bold. He did such a thing of deceiving the Emperor naturally. Wasn't he afraid that the Emperor would punish him if he knew it? Are you worried about me? Chu Luchen smiled, which was indescribably gentle like the spring breeze warming the whole frozen country. It seemed that the gloominess in his eyes had all turned into ashes, which made her heart beat wildly unconsciously. Your Highness. Well, I'll be fine. He won't punish me. Chu Luchen waved his hand and said with a smile. Your Highness, you'd better go back first. You met Prince Yu just now. If he goes back and says something, it's not good. Xiao Wanru was a little worried. If it were someone else, she would naturally not dare to offend him, but it was Chu Luiyue. Moreover, Chu Luiyue didn't look right today. Who knew if he would complain to the Emperor? Don't worry, he won't dare to say anything. Xiao Yanru is not only related to my uncle, but also to him. If he expresses his concern about Xiao Yanru at this time, what will my uncle think? Maybe he will think that he wants to compete with him for a woman. Chu Luchen said lazily. His words made Xiao Wanru silent for a while. What he said was indeed reasonable. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, Chu Luiyue didn't dare to nag in front of the Emperor. But she still felt strange. It was a little abnormal for Chu Luiyue to appear in front of her at this time. Xiao Xuanzi suddenly took a few steps forward and whispered something to Chu Luchen. Xiao Wanru didn't hear it clearly, but Chu Liuchen's eyes immediately became cold after hearing it. Although the smile on his face still looked gentle, it inexplicably made people feel cold and gloomy. Go ahead if you have something to do. Xiao Wanru stopped and looked at the sky. I can't go any longer now. I have to go back to Chuxiu Palace as soon as possible. If I go late, it will definitely make people suspicious. Okay, you can go back first. Chu Luchen didn't stop her this time. He put down her hand and said. Then he stepped aside, and the two eunuchs behind him carrying an empty sedan chair hurried forward. After Xiao Wanru got into the sedan chair, the two eunuchs carried her out of sight. The smile on Chu Liuchen's face immediately disappeared, and there was coldness and cruelty in his eyes. Xiao Xuanzi knew that his master had never been a gentle person, so he became more cautious. What do you mean? He went to the Empress's palace? Yes, it was said that Prince Yu went to the Empress's palace in a hurry. It seems that he has something important to discuss with the Empress. Xiao Xuanzi reported in a low voice. Let's go. I also want to see the Empress. I haven't been to the Empress's Fengyi Palace for a long time. Chu Luchen said. He got into the wheelchair, and Xiao Xuanzi pushed the wheelchair to Fengyi Palace. In Fengyi Palace, Chu Luiwei sat in front of the Empress, picked up the tea in his hand, took a sip, and then slowly put it down. His movements were extremely elegant and natural. He didn't seem to be angry or anything else at all, as if he hadn't met Chu Luchen and been angry before. I heard that something happened in my mother's palace, and it has something to do with the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion. Chu Luiwei raised his head and asked with concern with a slight smile. He didn't do it deliberately, but he didn't care too much about it, because it was just an ordinary thing. He came to ask when he heard it. The Empress also put down the teacup in her hand, wiped the water on the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief, and said with a very gentle smile, "It's not a big deal. I just took the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion as Baolin's wife. I heard that you used to be companions when you were young, but it's different now that you're a junior." What she said was actually heart-wrenching. A few days ago, Chu Luiwei and Chu Liuzhou had a fight because of Xiao Yanru. Later, Chu Liuzhou also told the Empress about it in detail. He was a little reckless at that time. When he rushed in directly, he only heard a few specious words from Chu Luiwei. Later, he thought that Xiao Yanru didn't say anything to prove that she and Chu Luiwei plotted against him. Chu Liuzhou was a little regretful. He felt that he shouldn't have made such a scene at that time, and he wouldn't have forced Xiao Yanru to almost commit suicide to apologize. But the Empress didn't think so. Based on her woman's intuition, she felt that Xiao Yanru was definitely not innocent in this matter. Just like what happened today, it seemed that Xiao Yanru was the victim in the end. Xiao Yanru couldn't be innocent. She was just a shrewd woman. But now, she couldn't be fierce even if she wanted to. Baolin is actually not bad. It's first Miss Xiao's blessing to be loved by my father, Chu Luiwei said calmly. He came to the Empress today not for Xiao Yanru. Xiao Yanru was just a transition. At this time, it was impossible for him to have any thoughts about Xiao Yanru. It's the best that you think so. Your father also feels gratified. The Empress didn't intend to let him go. She still said as if Chu Luiwei had originally come to snatch Xiao Yanru from the Emperor. Knowing that the Empress didn't like his fight with Chu Liuzhou, Chu Luiwei was not angry and let her vent her anger on him again and again. He still had this kind of tolerance. Moreover, he really didn't have any thoughts about Xiao Yanru now, so he didn't find this result unacceptable. It had nothing to do with him who Xiao Yanru married. It was Xiao Wanru who mattered. He wanted Xiao Wanru. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.